Good evening. Good evening. With the quorum present, I call the Francis School Board meeting to order. With us tonight is the Prop Howell Committee, represented by Ann Womack, Patrick Lane, and Mary Lang, that's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The board will entertain a motion to approve the agenda submitted.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mr. Summers, second by Mr. Hain. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, by roll call.
Ms. Ferguson?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Recognitions.
Mr. Andy Downs, principal from Francis Howell, as our student.
Hello, it's my privilege to present Madison Clifton as a student representative for the board tonight. She's here with her parents, Angela and Mark. I'm sorry, Angela and Kevin. My apology. She is a phenomenal student. Madison has taken a plethora of AP courses while enrolled at FHN. She is currently in 3 as a senior and still manages to be a member of the varsity dance team, Vice President of DECA, a member of the Math Honor Society, the National Honor Society, and a member of the publication staff at FHN. Madison spends her free time, don't really know what that is, which does not sound like much at all, working with Mission Give. It's an organization she helped create that provides care packages for families of patients at Children's Hospital, and also helping to work with Barnwell's journalism program. As you can see, she's truly a fantastic young lady who consistently is thinking about others. Her genuine sense of altruism is fantastic, and it's truly an honor to be her principal. So I present Madison Clifton.
Madison, you got to come over and get your picture taken.
Folks to come up?
They can come up, we got time.
Get Kevin or Mark?
Either one. Either one's fine with us. Look at that.
Good thing we didn't record that, huh?
How you doing, I'm Mark?
On July 28th, in this very room, the Board of Education voted to put Proposition Howell, a 60-cent operating levy, on the November ballot. That's probably not news to anybody here tonight. In the intervening 100 days, a community-led Prop Howell committee was formed for the purpose of advocating for the levy. The volunteer members of this group did a lot of work, ultimately intended for the benefit of our students. They met, organized, canvassed, created and shared literature, videos, and social media content. They wrote letters to the editor, they sent mailers, and worked the phone bank. They put up signs, and they worked at polling places on Election Day. Tonight, we would like to recognize some of the leaders of the Prop Howell Campaign Committee. Here to say a few words are co-chairs Patrick Lane and Mary Lang, and Treasurer Ann Womack.
Good evening, guys. On behalf of the Citizens for Proposition Howell Committee, we would like to thank the Francis Howell community for their support of Proposition Howell. We appreciate the efforts and support of our Board of Education, parents, administration, principals, teachers, staff, community members, FHEA, FISPA, the WISE Committee, and most importantly, our students. It is also important to thank the district's vendors, unions, and patrons for their generous contributions in helping us inform the community of the district's needs. Our efforts have brought our community closer together to focus on bringing our children the very best educational experience. It is important for us to continue to strive to maintain the high academic performance of our school district. You have some very difficult decisions in front of you as to determine the reductions ahead for the school district. We urge you, as a part of this discussion, to not give up on the support of our community as a whole. Proposition Howell did not pass. However, that margin was very narrow. We need to continue to include the community in the efforts to grow in academic excellence. It has been a true honor to serve the students of the Francis Howell School District through the work on this committee.
Certificates, you get the pictures too.
Did you bring Mark with you?
Why don't you move over?
Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Patrick. The Francis Howell School District and all of our schools are integral parts of our community, and part of that relationship is giving back. Our schools do a great job raising funds for a variety of worthwhile causes. One of those organizations near and dear to our hearts, and I mean that literally, is the American Heart Association. Last year, our schools raised almost $60,000 in a variety of campaigns. The top 3 fundraising schools are represented here tonight: Independence, Henderson, and Causley. Here to thank them for their efforts is the Youth Marketing Director of the American Heart Association, Barb Ryring.
Thank you very much. Good evening again. I'm Barb with the American Heart Association, and it is my honor and pleasure to partner with all of your schools. You have no idea how hard they work, these PE teachers and nurses in your schools, to foster healthy and active children. And you know that does equate to top test scores as well when your kids are active. So please keep that in mind, because physical education is so important, not just to the American Heart Association, but to all of our families. Most of you probably know heart disease is the #1 killer. We've made so many strides over the years since we were incorporated in 1925. We have heart transplants and bypass surgery, stents, all kinds of medicine and treatments, and we can find and operate on babies with congenital heart disease before they're even born. It goes on and on. But with all of these strides, we're still the #1 killer, 1 in 3 people. So our schools doing jump rope and hoops for heart, which is over 40 years old, has been a wonderful, wonderful experience. I don't know if you all know, but your kids can literally extend their lives by 5 years by just exercising more, eating right, and not smoking. We also made a big win in Missouri this past year. Many of you might know that CPR now is a requirement to graduate from high school. boy, we're going to be putting thousands of new lifesavers into our state of Missouri. So the American Heart Association has provided each high school with a big CPR kit that we can train, or your health teachers can train 30 kids in 30 minutes how to do hands-only CPR and how to use an AED machine. So there's mannequins, there's DVDs, and it cost about $1,000. So each high school got one of these. We are working on getting 2 to each high school as well. So starting this year, we're going to be teaching our seniors how to perform hands-only CPR and how to use an AED machine. So that's pretty cool. But this year, we had an outstanding year at Francis Howell. Actually, every year is. For the past, I bet, 10 years, Francis Howell has been one of the top school districts for donations raised for the American Heart Association. Many of you know, too, that it all stays in Missouri, which is really cool. And we have a lot of research going on right here. But we also have 3 categories that we recognize schools in, and that's Hoops for Heart, Jumping Hoops for Heart, and then Jump Rope for Heart. We're going to honor those top 3 schools, even though you have a whole lot of them this year. But the first school that I'd like to recognize is Cosley Elementary. I'd like Mrs. Niedringhaus, we have Scott Matson, and Jordan Partel, the PE teachers. Come on up here, please. They raised $10,000. They helped to save over 200 lives. Our next school was Henderson Elementary. Dr. Barker, Gail Anderson, Dan Haddock, and Dawn Voigt. If you would please come up here. They raised $11,050 for Jumping Hoops for Heart. They helped to save 221 lives. Last but not least, this was my highlight of the year. It was Independence Elementary. We weren't sure if they were going to do it because we had lost someone very dear at that school, Rick Pavia, and we wanted to be very respectful. But instead, Mrs. Pavia and her team of Michael Murphy and Julie Hagedorn, and who started it there, Donna Bostwick, the nurse, they just did an incredible job. Emily dressed up like a dog. She got silly stringed. She kissed a pig. We had the whole family there. It was really outstanding. They raised $20,451 and helped to save over 409 lives. Please come on up here. And then one more, we had a little typo on those numbers there. Francis Howell really raised $90,860. They were number 4 in the state of Missouri for donations raised. They helped to save 1,818 lives. I truly thank this school community for their generosity, and I would like Dr. Hendricks Harris to accept this for Francis Howell.
That concludes our recognition. Thank you, Mr. Lafata. Thanks, Barb.
Thank you so much. That's outstanding work. How about another round of applause for that group out there to help all those people that need. Next item on the agenda is patron comments. During patron comments, patrons are invited to address the Board of Education. Please come to the podium so everyone can hear. It's located right over there. Please adhere to the 3-minute time limit. The board is interested in hearing public concerns and opinions, but we do not answer questions during the meeting. Questions and concerns will be addressed by Dr. Mary Hendricks Harris and her staff via mail or phone call. Please remember the comments about individual students and staff are not allowed due to confidentiality. These concerns need to be brought to the attention of the administration, and attention may be brought to the board in closed session. Carrie Patterson. Is Carrie here? Carrie Patterson? There he is. Is there anybody out there by the name of Carrie Patterson? Okay.
I apologize, I didn't hear you. I was sitting out there.
That's okay.
My name is Carrie Patterson. I have 2 children within the district, one in high school and one in middle school, and just wanted to quickly voice my opinion about the Prop Howell not being passed. I'm extremely disappointed. I was a proponent of it when it was the year before at 90 cents. Of course, I was a proponent for it to pass this time at 60 cents. My husband and I moved into the district long before we had children, knowing that we wanted to send our children specifically to the school and the school district. We paid taxes for years without any children in the district, and we're happy to do it. I had hoped that the majority of our community would recognize the need for this to pass this year, but once again, it was voted down. As I have spoken to people who live in the district and voted against the proposition, I have found that some didn't have all the true facts. Many are quick to point out that the district needs to make more cuts, stop offering salaries to the board members, and make budgets that we can follow. As you know, this is incorrect thinking. Board members are all voluntary. Budgets are made to be followed. However, the past 3 years that I've been following our budgets, coming to these meetings, I have recognized the fact that the state of Missouri is offering less money to our school districts as a whole. So now we are left with the impossible task of building yearly budgets with less money from our state, less taxes from our community, and how to keep our district at a top level. The fact that people are voting our propositions down year after year, saying they don't want to pay more in taxes, haven't paid close attention. If they did, they would realize that the district has actually credited back previous tax levies, which are required by law. So when they say the district needs to make do with what we currently have, I would say they would need to understand that we're working with less money than ever before from the state and community. We have tough decisions that need to be made. I know the board has impossible decisions that need to be made, and unfortunately, I don't have any good offers or suggestions. But just please consider the impact that this will have at all students at all levels. We are trying to install a sense of community within our schools, and that's one of the biggest ways we can achieve this is through high school sports and activities. A sense of community that we install in our children now will continue when our children are having their children and their sense of community. When my son came home from his first sports practice as a freshman, I asked him, "How was it?" And he said, "Mom, I found my people." My heart melted when I heard my son say that. For the kids at that age, that is everything. This isn't going to be popular, but maybe we need to cut the buses. This affects me personally as I live within that radius, but I feel like that would be the least impactful.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Thank you, Ms. Patterson. FHEA? FESPA? Any other groups here tonight want to speak? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Motion by Ms. Walker, second by Ms. Cope. Any discussions or items to be pulled out? Hearing none by roll call.
Mr. Lang?
Aye. Motion carries 7-0. At this time, we'll be showing the MSBA November board report. I think we'll be showing it. Okay. How about we go on to best practice? Oh, never mind, we got it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's board report for the month of November. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at the state's revenue picture and how that might impact funding for our public schools both this year and in the future. Former state budget director and current governmental relations consultant Jim Moody has conducted an analysis of state revenue, and he says a diminishing revenue base combined with sluggish or non-existent revenue growth will likely mean less money available to fund public education and other needs in coming years. Moody told an audience at the recent MSBA annual conference one example of the diminishing revenue base is a provision in Senate Bill 19 passed in 2015 that effectively wiped out a large portion of Missouri's corporate income tax, thereby reducing state revenue by around $200 million.
And so I think revenue growth is going to be very limited or possibly non-existent in the next 10 or more years. And so, you know, I would go back to what I told you about starting to work on this with the School Boards Association in 1994. What happened in the 90s triggered a series of what I believe are serious tax mistakes, which have continued all the way through Senate Bill 19 in 2015. And we're just in a heck of a mess. We're 70% individual income. That's probably going to go up to 73, 74, 75%. We're going to be cutting our largest revenue source. Sales tax is growing very little, and the future just doesn't look good.
Moody also said state revenue will be affected by tax cuts likely to take effect later this fiscal year as a result of Senate Bill 509. He warned those attending his session at the annual conference there almost certainly will be some significant withholdings from the state budget during the current fiscal year. He estimated the withholdings at between $250 and $300 million, and some of that may come from state funding for public schools. Students throughout Missouri have more opportunities than ever to participate in career and technical education because of partnerships that have been developed between career and technical centers and higher education institutions around the state. There continues to be high demand for skilled workers in areas such as welding, mechanics, HVAC, and transportation. But business and industry leaders say they often struggle to fill those jobs. State Board of Education member Joe Driscoll says even more needs to be done to connect classroom academics with real-world skills.
We have employers that can't find enough skilled and educated
kids and people to take the really good jobs that exist out there. And on the other hand, we have communities and neighborhoods all around this state and other places in the country where the only jobs that kids and others can find are low-wage service jobs. So we have this really big gap between, you know, kind of a uplifting educational experience that allows kids to kind of get and keep good family and community supporting jobs, and then on the other end, the availability of jobs in a lot of places around the state, it just doesn't quite match up.
Driscoll made his comments during a panel discussion with members of the State Board of Education during the recent MSBA annual conference. MSBA's Center for Education Safety held its 10th annual Safe Schools and Colleges Conference at the Lake of the Ozarks just prior to the annual conference. The event drew school resource officers, board members, administrators, law enforcement officials, and community leaders who have a role in keeping our schools as safe as possible. Author and retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman was a keynote speaker at the event, and he said there are a number of low-cost steps schools can take to keep school buildings safe, including random visits by local law enforcement officers. Grossman also said installing an anonymous tip line can be helpful.
We need to have something they can text message chips in. We need to be able to call in. A baseline requirement is a tip line. We're stopping incidents daily across America with tip lines. It needs to be well advertised. They need to know where it is. They need to be able to call it in. They need to be able to text it in. And they need to be anonymous if they want to.
Neighborhood Watch crime prevention programs have been around for many years, but now MSBA's Center for Education Safety has developed a school-focused Neighborhood Watch program called Schools Watch. This program encourages parents, grandparents, and those living near school buildings to become another set of eyes watching for suspicious activity near schools. A free mobile app is available to allow neighbors to report such activity immediately to law enforcement officials. Contact MSBA's Center for Education Safety for details on how you can form a Schools Watch program in your school district. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
Okay, we'll move on to best practices. Dr. Greiner.
Good evening, Board. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce a couple of Francis Howell School District's finest. Behind me, we have Melinda Sheets, who is our district's literacy coordinator, as well as Aaron Thurston, who is our secondary ELA and social studies content leader. They've worked very hard the last couple years with our middle school English teachers to implement the Reader-Writer Workshop, and they're here tonight to talk a little bit about the journey that they've been leading our teachers on the last couple years.
Hi, good evening. I'm Erin Thurston. We decided to move the middle school English language arts classes to a workshop model for two reasons. Sixth grade data on multiple assessments indicated we needed to do something differently, and we wanted our students more actively engaged in their coursework. As we implement, we will monitor student progress on MAP and GATES assessments to ensure middle school students continually increase in reading and writing. Workshop model allows students time to volume read, which studies indicate volume reading has the greatest impact on increased student achievement. Secondly, this model empowers teachers to meet students where they are through backward design, working with individuals and small groups on specific skills to lead to success on the performance tasks. Thus, these three concepts serve as our non-negotiables for our middle school ELA classrooms. In order to better achieve these non-negotiables, we have been following this workshop model framework. Short 10-minute mini lessons allow the majority of class time to be spent on student differentiation. During independent work time, teachers strategically meet with individuals and groups to teach scaffolded lessons specifically addressing student needs, while other students choose ways to showcase their mastery of predetermined skills.
Student choice is the most powerful difference because the choices students have provide them ownership over their work. For example, during literature discussion groups, students choose from a variety of novels and lead in-depth discussions around theme, character analysis, and connections to the world around them. These discussions deepen comprehension and improve collaboration and communication skills. In addition to choosing what they read, students also have choice in how they demonstrate mastery of the skills. For instance, students can choose different ways to respond to literature. One student might create a TED Talk to create the main message of the novel, while another student may decide to write a book review. Differentiation and student choice increases academic success and builds student motivation. In order to make this shift in pedagogy, 2 days of professional development occurred in the spring of 2015 prior to implementation. This spring training included studying of models and videos, book studies, and discussion of the benefits of a workshop model. As we began the implementation in 15-16, support continued through quarterly class visits, peer coaching, and district learning days. This second year of implementation follows the same format with the addition of our partnership with the Wentzville School District. During these days, teachers receive PD around workshop components, conduct peer observations, and participate in discussions to broaden our learning on ELA best practices. A shift to workshop model takes a minimum of 3 years to fully implement, so we have focused on 6th grade teachers and students. This spring, we will be mimicking this process to implement workshop in our 7th and 8th grade classrooms, starting in 17-18. We have a short video for you to hear from the teachers and students.
The workshop model has impacted my teaching practice because I feel like I'm putting the learning more in the students' hands.
We're not feeling that we're ready to do our things. We can always just go back and reread the book or your chapter, and it's not you work on this until the end of the class. You can do something else.
I feel like students are reading more, and when they come to check out from the Learning Commons, they come in with more of a purpose. They know what they're looking for, and they'll ask teachers better questions about finding the books they want to read. They'll ask their peers better questions. So I haven't seen that as often where 6th graders will come in and want to check out the same title and then read it as a group over the next couple of weeks.
Really has helped me started to read because I've almost achieved my goal. And my goal is to read 40 books before quarter end, and I'm only at 38.
Today they were turning in some projects and the kids were looking through, they were holding them up, wow, you know, theirs looks like this and mine looks like that, and we took our learning in totally different places and they thought it was really cool. They got the chance to individualize it.
Sometimes I wouldn't read because I didn't feel like it, but now I want to read a lot.
And what specific activities of workshop model helped you read a lot?
The 10 minutes of reading at the very beginning of class every day. Books that we chose to do. Like, it's just something new for me. I'm starting to write more and like being more descriptive.
I've learned a lot about my students from conferencing. I learned that they're actually reading, and I can learn what they're actually learning, and they learn that I actually care about their reading lives and what they're reading. I would say the best professional development I've received in the workshop model practice that we've been doing so far is going and visiting other teachers.
But I've learned that I'm getting a lot faster at reading. I used to have to finish a book in like 4 weeks. It used to take me that long. This book I've only had for like a week reading. I love reading.
We're excited about this new addition to our middle school ELA classrooms, and we're happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Board, do you have any questions at this time? Well, thank you so much. It's a monumental task to get kids to read, and you know, I think that's awesome. It looks like it's working out pretty good. And I remember growing up, we didn't really have extensive libraries. We had this thing called a bookmobile that came to our school, and I couldn't wait. It was so exciting that day that I'm telling you my age right now. So, but it was so exciting that when the bookmobile showed up to get a book. So it's neat to see kids want to read. So. Get them off their phones. Thank you so much. Next item is course descriptions. Is there a presentation, or is that just for information?
Tonight we are excited to seek approval for our 17-18 course enrollment guides for grades 6 through 12. Each year, the district provides a review process for stakeholders to make additions and changes to the previous year's guides. There are several documents on board docs, which include a brief PowerPoint as well as a comprehensive spreadsheet that outlines all of the changes from last year's publication. The PowerPoint provides course descriptions of the courses to be added as offerings at the high school level, which include Project Lead the Way Cybersecurity, Project Lead the Way Biomedical Innovations, AP Human Geography, Advanced Weight Training, and Pre-AP Calculus. Dr. Greiner is able to provide additional information or answer any questions that the board may have about the 17-18 enrollment guides or new courses.
Ms. Cope?
Is this the first time we're having a cybersecurity course coming
Yes.
next year? So that's very exciting. I can tell you that working for a defense contractor in the area, it's very important to us to have that skill set. So seeing it brought down into the high school is a great thing. So very excited about that.
Anything else, board? Madison, would you like to comment at all? No? You know, I forgot to tell you, if you'd like to talk, you can talk at any time. Just press that button. The only thing you can't do is vote tonight. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Greiner. Next item on the agenda is...
We do need a motion to approve the course guides?
Yes, we do. We do. Board will entertain a motion to approve the 2017-2018 middle school, high school enrollment guides as submitted.
So moved.
I'm going to go with Hain and Cope. By roll call?
Mr. Hain?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Next item is the summer school proposal. Mr. Brothers.
Good evening, Mr. LaFata and Board of Education. I'm here to talk to you about the 2017 summer school proposal. Kind of hard to believe that we're already talking about summer school, but the weather outside makes it seem like a summer, so maybe it's appropriate. So I'm going to start with just an overview of the program. And given the fact that we had such high enrollment and student participation in the programs last summer, we want to continue on with those same programs, and we're going to add a few. So elementary summer success, middle school summer success, high school credit recovery and credit advancement, the STEM, middle school STEM camp, elementary STEAM camps, middle school app camp, and the high school early warning system we'll continue on with. A few of those have some minor tweaks that I'll discuss with you in just a couple minutes. We are also going to add a Title I summer reading enrichment program at Central Elementary School. That will be in addition to the elementary summer school success program. And right now we're exploring adding a kindergarten summer success program, transition program for entering kindergarten students, and a high school advanced placement prep camp for students about to take AP courses for the very first time. At a later date, we will bring you more information about the kindergarten success program and the high school advanced prep camp. On this slide, you're going to find the dates, times, and some of the logistics on all the different programs. I won't bore you by reading through them, but leave it up for just a couple minutes for you to take a look at. Kind of in a summary, the summer programs will start the week of June 5th, continue on for about 4 weeks, take a week off during the week of July 4th, and then 2 weeks after that, finish up on July 21st. Okay, summer school programming, basically as long as we have students wanting to come to our summer programs and coming to the programs and attending the programs, summer school basically pays for itself through ADA dollars. You can see that most of the programs we do bring in some revenue, estimating about $125,000 revenue over expenses. Extended school year program, though, we do bring in some revenue, but not enough to cover the expenses. That is a program, though, that students with IEPs and An IEP team determines if students need extended time to meet their IEP goals, and if so, they write that into their IEPs, and we do provide that opportunity for special education students that need that extra time during the summer. So some things with the proposal. Some things we're just going to continue on. Some things, a few tweaks. So for instance, go back one. We're going to establish Becky David as a site for the Elementary Summer Success Program, the Elementary Extended School Year Program, and the Elementary STEAM Camp. And then we're going to establish Barnwell Middle School as the site for the Middle School Summer Success Program, STEM Camp, and AB Camp. That's a little bit different than last summer. Last summer we had several different buildings host the different elementary summer school and the summer camps. The same thing with the middle school. However, with that model, we did not have an administrator on duty all the time at the different camp buildings. We didn't have a nurse on duty all the time, and that became something of a concern for us. And we wanted to make sure that all of the different programs had those services available and had the support staff there to help out the students, the teachers, and the staff that are going to be working with our students. We're going to establish Francis Howell North High as a site for the credit recovery and credit extension, or credit advancement, along with the early warning system Summer Success. We'll establish Central Elementary School as a site for the Summer Reading Enrichment Program. Again, this is going to be a program only available to Central Elementary students. It's going to be paid for by their Title I funds over at Central Elementary School. We're going to continue on with the Elementary Summer Success and Elementary STEAM programs as they were last summer. We're going to continue on with the Middle School Summer Success Program in a similar way that it was last summer. Again, 6 weeks. Really amazing last summer that we had middle school students come to school over the summer for 6 weeks. They had such high attendance rates. But to enhance their opportunities, we've made a couple tweaks to it. During the day, the middle school students had the opportunity to take 2 90-minute blocks of an elective course, and it was the same elective course. This summer we propose to open it up so that students will be able to select from 2 different electives. So they'll take 90 minutes of one elective course and 90 minutes of a different elective course. And within that, for our 5th to 6th grade students, we'll identify some at-risk students and provide some transition activities and transition programming for those students so that they get a leg up prior to entering middle school as a 6th grade student. We're going to continue on with the middle school STEM and AMP camps, and continue on with the high school credit recovery and credit advancement programs. We can continue on with the 8th to 9th grade early warning system transition program, giving those entering 9th graders a leg up, providing transition activities, information about activities going on, and just some emotional and social supports that these students need to be successful in high school. Talked a little bit about the Central Elementary School Summer Enrichment Program. That program's not going to happen at the same time as Elementary Summer Success Program, so that those students will have the opportunity to experience both programs, and truly it will be an enrichment to encourage reading over the summer. And this time, we're going to explore adding a Kindergarten Summer Success Program that will give our teachers and administrators some information about kindergarten students before they start with them, along with letting the kindergartners experience what a typical elementary day might be like, with some transitions in different areas of the building that they need to get used to. And then finally, we want to explore adding a high school advancement placement prep camp for students that will be taking AP for the very first time, getting them with study skills and just the tools that they need to be successful in a highly rigorous college level course. Again, at a later date, we will bring you some more details about the Kindergarten Summer Success Program and the High School Advanced Placement Prep Camp, but just want to make you aware that's on our radar. We're having talks with different teacher groups and administrators to make sure that those are some high quality programs we can offer this summer. And how about, do you have any questions for me at this time?
Before we start discussion on this item, board need motion to approve the 2017 summer school proposal as presented.
So moved.
Second. Motion by Mr. Summer, second by Mr. Hain. Mr. Summer.
Thank you. If we could slide back to slide number 5, I'll talk slow while you do that. It mentions the establishment of the Summer Reading Enrichment Program for our Title I students at Charlotte Elementary, and I think that's great, and I encourage students to participate in that. What about our students at the other Title I schools that we have in our district?
We are definitely open to exploring that with the other title buildings in our district. This is something that Central Elementary tried to get off the ground last summer and has been working with Dr. Garland and Stacy King, the principal over there, to get off the ground. And so at this time, we were ready to move forward with the Central Elementary program.
Do the students at the other Title I schools have an opportunity to attend Central if there's room?
They will not, because that is tied to the Central Elementary Title I funds, and that goes to serve the Central Elementary students.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Brothers, what is the budget prepared for as far as the number of students that you projected? I didn't see that.
It is, I will have to get the exact number for you. It's very similar to last summer.
Okay.
Probably in the range of 1,800 students.
15 to 1,800? Okay. And
the specific numbers are in the summer school proposal. That's not the PowerPoint.
That's the bigger version.
Right.
And then what is the cost for transportation for that?
Yes, for those programs that we do provide transportation to, it runs about $225,000.
Okay, total.
Total.
Okay. Any other questions, board? Hearing none, by roll call.
Mr. Summer?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Board will entertain a motion to approve the October 2016 financial statements as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Summer, second by Ms. Ferguson. Is there any discussion, board? Sounds like we don't have very good news coming from the state. Mr. Supple?
Mr. LaFata, I would just echo something that was in the MSBA report, and that is the incoming chair of the House Budget Committee is also estimating that the governor-elect will probably inherit somewhere in the neighborhood of a $200 million deficit in the budget that will have to be addressed sometime in the spring. So we are concerned that since the current governor has already made reductions, that we'll see a greater impact. And while we've had a little bit of a seesaw, as you can see in the financials memo that I provided, the governor withheld some funds and then released some of those, but I anticipate that there may be greater withholdings as we get into the spring, particularly if the revenue picture doesn't pick up. And it really is attributable to a reduction in the structure that allows the state to even collect revenue. So it's not a matter of people not paying what they owe. It's that the taxing structure has been changed so that the state no longer has the ability to collect the taxes necessary to support the level of budget that they've adopted. So I think there are some structural problems there that hopefully we can address at some point in the future, but at least in the short term we'll continue to create some problems for particularly for K-12 education, which takes about a third of the state's general revenue budget.
So that 200 million might be 1/3 of that is what we're looking at as far as adjustments from the state potentially?
It's hard to say because there's probably a little bit greater leeway, if you will, for K-12 education than for some of the other programs that are funded by general revenue. So for instance, the Medicaid program, growth in that program, that needs to be addressed. And so the state general revenue that goes toward that program, there's probably not a lot of discretion over reducing Medicaid expenditures. So I don't want to make an estimate as to what it is, but K-12 just makes up such a large section of the state's general revenue budget that we're likely to shoulder a large share of those potential reductions.
Now, is that in addition to the 18 million that he cut a month, 2 months ago? Or not cut, but withheld?
That's correct.
So that's in addition?
We anticipate this will be in addition to.
Okay. And we had not heard about them funds being released for our transportation expenditures?
There was a small portion that was released, but the vast majority of the transportation funds continue to be withheld.
Okay.
So the governor withheld 16 million, and I believe he released $1.5 million.
Okay. So it was a trickle-down number for us then? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Got a motion on the floor. Any other discussion, board? Hearing none by roll call.
Ms. Cope?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Bill, entertain a motion to approve purchases over 7,500 as presented.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Cope, second by Ms. Ferguson. Any discussion, board? Questions? Hearing none, by roll call.
Ms. Walker?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Bill, entertain a motion to approve the 2016-2017 revised budget as presented.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Summer, second by Mr. Hain. Mr. Supple.
Thank you, Mr. LaFata. The board had an opportunity to see the document, but a couple highlights that I would share. We've instituted the practice of bringing the board a revised budget because after the board adopts the budget in June, several significant occurrences impact our budget, and this gives us an opportunity to adjust the budget as necessary for those. So we make an estimate of our tax rate when we produce the budget for the board's adoption, but the board actually sets the tax rate in September following the after Board of Equalization hearings. And so we're able to incorporate the actual impact based on changes in assessed value in the actual tax rate that was levied. Similarly, the federal government's budget runs October 1 through September 30th. So after we have now submitted our final expenditure reports for the prior year, and we have a much clearer idea of our funding in terms of federal dollars for the coming year, both what revenue changes may be as a result of federal funding and what expenditure changes there may be as a result of federal funding. And then there are always some truing up of the budget just based on changing things. We create our budget, again, beginning in the early spring, and it's based on the staffing that we have at the time and the proposal that's been approved by the board. But after July 1, we have a clear idea of who the actual people are who are going to be filling those positions, and so we make those adjustments to the budget as well. And so all of that is summarized within the budget. You can see that there's relatively small amounts of change that take place overall. Less than about 0.75% of a change in our revenue and about 0.25% change in our expenditure. But this does give gives us an opportunity to right-size our operating budget based on things we know at this time. The other piece that I would share with the board would be the 5-year projections that have been updated based on last year's actual data and the revised budget that is being presented to the board tonight. One thing that I shared with the board at the time that I last shared these projections is that the reductions that we've made over the past several years, not most significantly the last 2 years, $12.5 million, but another $8 million spread out over several years prior to that. Those 20-some million dollars of budget changes have gotten us to a place where if we do nothing different, we can kind of maintain a certain status quo. Of course, we know that it's impossible not to do something different because our accountability structure is changing. There will be some new requirements from the federal government in terms of things that we need to do. We've received some mandates from the state. You heard the American Heart Association speak this evening about the requirement that we teach CPR for all graduating seniors. We also have a mandate to do dyslexia screening. So there are impacts that are happening to us that we need to address. And in addition to that, there are things that are part of that $20 million of cuts that we know we can't sustain forever. So we've paused our technology refresh cycle, but at some point we'll need to address that issue. We've made significant cuts to our curriculum development, and at some point we will need to address that, particularly as we adjust to the new Missouri learning standards and we get more information based on the standardized test results. So we know it's not possible to stay completely still, but the board has taken the action of making the reductions necessary to bring our revenue and expenditures much more closely into alignment. And so as you take a look at those projections, you can see that us kind of a bottom line, we are within the board policy in terms of fund balance throughout the projection period, which extends till fiscal year 22, staying somewhere in the 17 to 18% range. Of course, again, that assumes no changes, no significant changes in our revenue structure and no major changes in our expenditures as well. So just as a precursor to a discussion that we'll have later, I wanted to kind of frame the conversation around what the projections show as a result of the minor adjustments that we've made as part of the revised budget.
Thank you, Mr. Supple. Does the board have any questions at this time? And we were going to have a discussion about, this is the revised budget, Mr. Summer.
And just for clarification, to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly, whether you're looking at the 5-year projection or if you're looking at the revenue by source, when we're talking state funding, we always have heard in the public that state funding continues to get cut. And just so I understand correctly, year after year, we continue to receive more revenue this year than we did last year. Now, it may be a smaller percentage of the total revenue, but from everything I've seen, we always receive more revenue. May not be a lot, but is that a correct position to take? When you look at total state revenue?
If you look at total state revenue, I think that's fair. And as you know, as I noted in the a discussion for the revised budget, one of the big changes this year that affected our state revenue is that we were able to claim almost $1 million more in high needs fund reimbursement. Now, that's not our basic state aid. That's a separate category that reimburses us whenever the cost of education that we incur for a single student exceed 3 times the average cost of education in our school district. So we're very glad to get that additional reimbursement, but it's indicative of the fact that our student population is changing. We're having a greater number of students with high needs who are driving a huge amount of dollars. So you consider that our average cost of education, round numbers, $11,000. So the average cost for the high needs students has to exceed $33,000. And if we're collecting $1 million more than we did last year, you can get a sense of the scale of the number of high needs students that we have this year compared to the prior year. And of course, the costs associated with that, some of our internal costs increase, so it's not necessarily only attributable to an increase in the number of students. It's certainly a function of some of the embedded costs associated with it. But we are incurring a great deal of expense to educate those kids, and we're fortunate to be reimbursed for a portion of that additional expense.
Mr. Haynes?
Yeah, do we want to, I have a couple questions on this. Do we want to cover them now, or do we want to cover them in a workshop, or what? I guess one of the main questions is next year is a reassessment year.
Yes.
So we're seeing appreciating values in the county, so I know we're allowed to collect equal to the CPI for the area on the
Correct.
Additional revenue. Plus, we do have some new subdivisions and new growth, which will get all of that. It looks like you've allowed about $2.2 million. In previous years, a lot of times that's been higher than that, or is that because we're just coming out of a lower cycle, or is that?
Well, I think something that's impacted it previously is the CPI. So as I shared with the board, the 2013 cycle, when that was a negative reassessment cycle, so we didn't get to collect on that, but the CPI that year was 1.5%. In 2015, the CPI was 0.8%. So it was the amount of growth we could recognize was half of what we would have recognized previously. So yes, I think our assessed value is going to continue to grow, and yes, we're going to have some new construction. But I think our overall growth will be lower than we've seen in prior cycles, because I anticipate that CPI is going to continue to be relatively low. I was following the news today. The chairman of the Federal Reserve is trying to make a determination about, whether interest rates will be rising in December, and there's some mixed signals on whether the economy is, needing to be cooled down a little bit, or whether we're still waiting for it to heat up. So I would imagine that for the 2017 cycle, we'll continue to see a very low CPI, which means we don't recognize as much growth, even when we see growth in our assessed values.
Okay, so 2.2, that probably a conservative.
Purposefully lower than what we've seen in prior cycles, because I think the CPI that we had in prior cycles was twice or more what we will probably see in the 2017 cycle.
Okay, and then the other question I had is on benefits. It seems like it's about almost, I'm rounding numbers off here, about $1 million more. Is that more for, has there been an increase in the pension, or is that more to healthcare costs?
That's healthcare costs almost exclusively.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Walker?
So as I look at the budget and we're projecting out for several years, which of the things that have been frozen, because we have technology, textbooks, salaries, we have a lot of different things that are currently on hold. So where are we at within this 5-year budget? We can't go 5 years without technology and textbooks.
The purpose of the projection is to show you what the trend would be based on whatever set of assumptions go into this. So this set of assumptions is that those things that we'd like to add back are not added in. So this does not account for adding back any of the things that we'd like to add back.
So when we get to the financial planning section, we do have a couple of items that we feel like we can no longer put on hold, and as a result of that, we are proposing additional cuts, and that is what we'll discuss during that workshop time. Technology being one of those things.
So we're going to vote on the amended budget, the revised budget, and then we're going to have discussions about further cuts after that. Am I missing something?
Correct. But the revised budget is the plan for this year. These projections are just a way to show how the changes made to the revised budget impact the projections from what the board saw previously. And the discussion that we will have later this evening will be about fiscal year 18 and what we would do in fiscal year 18, which would, of course, whatever those things are, would change what is projected for fiscal year 18.
So correct me if I'm wrong, sorry to drag this out, guys, but we're still looking at a $1.8 million deficit for this year.
We are, but I will tell you that if you take a look historically what has happened, we typically see somewhere between a 1 to 2% swing in revenue and a similar 1 to 2, sometimes a little bit higher swing on expenditures. So if we had a 1% change if revenue was 1% greater than what's reflected in the revised budget and expenditures were 1% lower, we would have a balanced budget for this year. And similarly, as you look across a projection period, the projection period doesn't account for that typical swing. It's merely taking a look at what the actual budget numbers are at this time. And so similarly, if you had a 1 or 2% change in either your revenue or expense, we would essentially have a balanced budget across the entire projection period, probably even in the outer years as we see the cumulative impact of reassessment cycles come into play, that we would probably be producing a surplus budget in those years.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, the state's still not fully funding the formula, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so if you take a look at the expenditures and the deficit for this year, and you take into consideration there's a potential additional cuts, that would increase that number, correct? If they withheld additional funds from the state, like because they said there's a $200 million decision down there yet?
Right. I do think that we've been, I think we were very conservative in our budget estimate at the time that we adopted this budget in terms of the formula. And, you know, last year, the state ended the year with a state adequacy target that was 61.45, and currently we're getting funded at 61.25, and we had projected our preliminary budget was based on 61.10. So we've revised our state revenue upwards, and I think even if there were some withholdings, we probably won't be as far off, because I think that the budget anticipated the state's budget anticipated a higher state adequacy target than they're currently paying on, but DESE and the Deputy Commissioner has been conservative in paying on a lower SAT, and we saw last year that the SAT grew over the course of the year, and the funding at 61.45 came in the latter months of the fiscal year. So we may not see as much growth in the SAT as we move forward in this fiscal year based on withholdings, but I don't anticipate, my sense would be, particularly since the state has access to even better information than I do about the income at the state level, and for the first months of the fiscal year, they were paying us on 61.10, and they bumped it up to 61.25. And the Deputy Commissioner has said that they don't want to surprise school districts with a big reduction at the end of the fiscal year. So I think that 61.25 gives us an opportunity to more accurately reflect what we're going to collect, which is not the same amount that we got paid on last year. But so we may not see the same growth, but we may not see a restriction from where we are.
I think I would just add, I understand your question about not passing Proposition Howell and how that affects this year's budget. I think when we made the decision to have this year's budget, we were not counting on Prop Howell even being a levy for the school year. And so the budget was planned accordingly. We were not planning on that additional income at the time, and the board agreed to a deficit at that time. Now, Mr. Supple has some good news. The deficit, since you planned that budget, has already decreased, and we are anticipating it will continue to decrease, and we likely will have at least a balanced budget by the end of the school year.
So that transportation withholdings within that number then?
We have adjusted our transportation reimbursement downwards in the revised budget based on what we believe is going to happen with the withholdings and so forth.
Okay. Any other discussion? We'll have plenty during the workshop. By roll call?
Ms. Ferguson?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0.
And Mrs. Walker, I hope that I was able to answer your questions, and if not, we'll have an opportunity during during the work session. I'll be happy to come back to those questions.
Board will entertain a motion to approve the board election and board candidate training dates as presented.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Ms. Walker, second by Mr. Hain. This is an opportunity for people that would like to run for the board. We will also train you, so feel free. There's actually 3 seats that are up this year. My seat, Mr. Summers' seat, and Ms. Cope's seat. So it's all 3 of us in a row. So one of you guys could be sitting here. Any discussion, board? By roll call?
Mr. Lang?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Board, there's a policy in your packet for first reading. If you have any questions concerning the policies that are put out there, please feel free to get those questions in. Prior to the next meeting, it'll be in the consent agenda. That concludes our open meeting, and we'll take about a 5-minute recess, and we'll go to our workshop where we sit down here and have real discussions. Thank you. And It's on. Can you turn this on? Board, if we could get to our seats so we can get started. Board of Education. Folks, if we could quiet down now. Thank you. First item on the agenda for the work session is the 2018-2019 calendar. I'm going to turn things over to Ms. Simpkins.
Thank you, Mr. LaFata. I am pleased to share with you a draft of the 2018-19 school year calendar for discussion this evening. So our 2018-19 school year calendar was created very similar to the 16-17 and 17-18 school year calendars that have already been approved by the Board of Education. We've made some minor adjustments as needed just due to dates and timing of the calendar. Several points are considered when we put the calendar together, and you'll see there on the screen these are lots of areas that we take into consideration and receive lots of comments on when we send the survey out to the community and to our staff. But each of these items, whether it is the length of the breaks, the start of the school year, when the early release days are placed, all are very important to our school year calendar. Other parameters and considerations that we take into consideration when creating this calendar is that our students start with less than a full week. That's important to our teachers and to our families. That teachers return to school after August 1st if possible. We try to keep those quarters and semesters as even as possible for those students that are taking electives throughout the year. Try to make the students' last day without considering the snow days before Memorial Day. And we know that graduation must remain on that first Saturday of June for the venue that we have to hold those ceremonies. And this year for the 18-19 calendar, that was a little bit troublesome as the first Saturday of June was June 1st. So it really did not give us a whole lot of play within the calendar. So big ideas for the 18-19 calendar. The first day for staff will be August 1st. Students will return on August 9th. And the year will begin with a 2-day week for students. They'll come to school on Thursday and Friday that first week. We did include the 3 full PD days for our teachers within this calendar. Fall break will be 1 full week plus an additional day for students, and spring break will be 1 full week. Continuing with that, 3rd and 4th quarter dates, end dates will float to keep those quarters even, just based on our use of snow days. And those snow day makeup days will be added at the end of the school year. We did give some consideration to election days in November of 2018 and April of 2019, should there be items placed on those ballots, just making sure that our students are not in school those days. And then we have had conversations about parent-teacher conferences changing in the past, and those did not change for the 18-19 calendar. Those are stayed the same for fall and spring. So oftentimes throughout our comments, throughout our surveys, we hear that our breaks are getting shorter and shorter. And so this is just a visual representation of the last several years of how long fall break has been, how long Christmas break has been, and spring break. So you can see we have been pretty consistent throughout the years in the length of time that we include for those breaks. Same comments often throughout our survey is that we start earlier and earlier every year. And so this again is a visual representation of our start date for the last 8 years, and we have stayed very consistent throughout the course of those times. Another comment often heard is that we start much earlier than other school districts throughout the area. And so we know that the 2016 start of the school districts on the screen, we don't know what their projected start dates are for the future, but we are proposing for the 18-19 school year a start date of August 9th, which is not much earlier than many of the districts that are listed here on the screen. For comparison, in Fort Zumwalt and Rockwood, we are about a week earlier, and that's typically because we include that week of fall break within our calendar, so that does create a little bit of a difference there. Our semesters and our quarters will be equal in the 18-19 school year, allowing for those electives to stay pretty similar. And so we did take this draft and send it out for comment and survey to our staff and our community, and these are the results of that survey. 54% of our staff was very satisfied or satisfied, and when we added that staff that was neutral to the calendar, we were at about a 73% approval rating. So 26% of our staff being dissatisfied. And then with our community, 56% were very satisfied or satisfied, and adding in those that were neutral brings us up to about 84%, so only 15% being unhappy with the calendar as it stands. So some common themes that we heard throughout our survey, you'll see the things here. Oftentimes those comments, as you read them, we hear fall break is not long enough, and then the next comment is take away fall break, we don't need it at all. Same for Christmas break and spring break, the start of the school year, and so forth. So oftentimes we see very conflicting comments within the survey. Our start date is set so that we can get all of our parameters in there and still have final exams before Christmas break. So that we kind of work backwards from the end of those semesters and kind of get to that start date. Professional development days was also another comment that we heard from our teachers. Very concerned about the 2 half PD days that we have on the January calendar. In past years, we have added minutes to our teacher's day and have balanced that out with only requiring a half a day of attendance on a PD day. So those are considered full contract days in our calendar. So it does not allow for us to combine those 2 half PD days in January. So that is why you'll see those 2 half PD days don't change. So some considerations that we looked at, one was moving the PD day from after fall break for our teachers to before, but that would be a struggle for our professional development committees in planning that PD close to the month prior. We looked at a later end date, a later start date, and that longer break for teachers, but unfortunately with the parameters that we have for the calendar, we were unable to make any changes. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have or have any discussion about the 18-19 calendar.
Simpkins, if you want to serve on a school district committee, if you serve and maintain that committee membership through the calendar committee, you will be qualified to serve on any committee because it is an interesting process. And I served on it one time and I sat very quietly and just listened because everyone has a different philosophy, and it's a very, very difficult thing to do is to develop a year-long calendar for our entire school district. But hats off to you. Any new chiefs gets that assignment, so Ms. Simpkins got that assignment, so she's done a nice job, and we appreciate your work. Board, do you have any questions about the calendar? Dare you ask?
I do too.
Boy.
Okay, so when you talked about the 2 half days, did you say they were both full? I was a little confused on that. It sounded like they were both full days, but the teachers are coming half a day.
Yes, so several years ago, the workday for teachers was increased by several minutes, and in order to compensate for that, we took those minutes and applied them to those half PD days, and so it is paid as a full contract day, but to make up that full contract day, they only have to be in attendance a half day, and then those minutes that they are working throughout the school year make up for the rest of that time.
So you mentioned, you mentioned that this year it was hard. I'm not sure it's on. Can you hear me? Good? Good. I'll talk loud. You mentioned that first Saturday in June is graduation, so therefore it's a constraint as
It
you
is.
plan the calendar. So for that school year, what is do you know the last day of school?
Yes.
For that year, how close is it to graduation?
Well, the last day of school will be May 16th if we don't use any of those snow days.
Okay.
If we use all 10 snow days, we're going to get all the way up through May 31st. So I've had some conversations with our high school principals, and if we get to that point where we have utilized all 10 snow days, we'll have to do some modifying of final exams so that they have a day between. That's typically one of our parameters, is to have a day between the last snow day and graduation so that they can notify families of graduation requirements or missing those, and that just get that work done.
Sure.
And so this calendar was very tricky to work with because that we could not move into June. So they will modify the final exam schedule for seniors if we need to do that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
As a member of the Board of Education, since we have the opportunity tonight, I'd like to hear input from a student who's lived this calendar the last 12 and a half years. Any thoughts you might have on the pros and cons sitting in the desk of a student rather than as a board member or administrator?
Okay. So I actually quite like how our school year is planned out. I know how you talked about earlier how a lot of parents or people complain about how we start earlier than some other school districts. And I personally, that doesn't bother me because we do have the extra fall break in there, and that's a really nice break for us to have during the year, and I wouldn't want that to be taken away at all. Some other things. No, I really actually enjoy our school year calendar. I think it's pretty solid. I don't know. I like it.
Did you ever experience cycles?
I did.
You did. Tell us about that experience.
I don't know. I don't even know if I remember a whole lot about that. I was very young. Wasn't that where you went 9 weeks and got 3 weeks off? Yeah.
You started in July.
Yeah, that was not fun. I did not like that. You started so early, and then you would get 9 weeks in the year, and then just have the 3 weeks off, and it would be so hard to get back into it after having the 3 weeks. I don't know. Personally, I don't like it very much, but.
Well, it was one of them items that we had that in order to utilize our buildings, because we were a fast-growing school district, we had to utilize the buildings efficiently, and so we had many opportunities for teachers to come in, teach, and then leave, and then some other teachers came in. It was just, it was a way to avoid building additional buildings, and so I'm not sure, was our last graduating class that had cycles? Is that coming up? Probably pretty quickly, because we haven't had them for 8 or 9 years, right? Maybe 9 years? One more year. One more year.
One more year.
Okay. Any other questions on the calendar? Anybody want to serve on the calendar committee?
Thank you, Mr. LaFata. We'll bring the calendar back next month for the board to vote on.
Thank you. Next item is the academic workshop, and I'm going to turn over to Nicole Whitesell.
Thank you. Tonight I will be sharing information regarding our APR data. I'm not getting a good clicker signal here. There we go. Before we look at the APR data, I just wanted to share again the DESE implementation schedule. And I shared this back in August, but just a little refresher. The end of last year, DESE released revised Missouri Learning Standards, but the MAP assessments will be the same for this school year. New assessments over the revised Missouri Learning Standards will start in the 17-18 school year for ELA and math, and subsequent years for science and then social studies. So currently our teams are making any adjustments as needed regarding the revised Missouri Learning Standards. And this year in the spring, our juniors will take the ACT again, as they have the past couple of years. Oops. This slide shows our APR points and percent for the last 3 years. Here you can see the gains of our APR points. For 2016, all of our points possible were earned except for in subgroup achievement, where we earned 13 out of 14 points. More specifically, we earned 3 out of 4 points in subgroup achievement in science. And our 15-16 CSIP goal was to earn 100% of our APR points, and we came close to that at 99.3%. This slide shows which APR standards are being met at the 2020 target, which is the highest level of the targets for the districts listed. You can see that we are meeting the 2020 targets for all students in 3 out of the 4 tested areas. We are not yet performing at the 2020 target in subgroup achievement, which is a similar trend the other districts listed. We are performing at the 2020 target level for ACT, advanced placement, post-secondary placement, attendance, and graduation. It's important to note that the APR points do not exactly equal academic performance. For example, the Post-Dispatch article noted that Fort Zumwalt also had the same APR as Francis Howell, but based on this chart, the academic performance is different in terms of achieving at the 2020 target level for all APR standards. And keep in mind that APR points look at data over 3 years, and you can earn points for progress, continuous improvement within a 3-year period, versus just status on a 3-year average. The next set of this slide shows our combined math performance index for each of the 4 content tested areas, ELA, math, science, and social studies, and it combines them into a single MPI score just to give a perspective of where we stand and compared to other districts in St. Charles County and in St. Louis County. As you can see, we are the highest performing district in St. Charles County, but not the highest in St. Louis County for the districts that are listed here. And the next set of slides takes this single MPI and looks at each of the 4 tested areas. So this slide shows how Francis Howell compares within St. Charles and St. Louis County, other high-performing districts. And we also included one outside of St. Louis, Blue Springs, which is in Kansas City, for ELA in both overall achievement and in subgroup achievement. And I'd like to note that the 2020 target range is an MPI of 385.7 all the way up to 500 for ELA. And those 2020 target ranges for the MPI vary by content area. Similar data, but for math. So again, it's showing where we compare, how we compare to districts in Missouri, St. Louis, in St. Charles County, and then Blue Springs. And the 2020 target range for math is 392.8 to 500. So we are sitting at 381.4. So this is the one content area, and for all students, that we are not achieving at the 2020 target yet. This clicker is being sensitive tonight. For science, again, similar data within the districts. And the 2020 target range for science is 352.8 up to 500. We are at 379.4. For all students, and subgroup is 325.7. Social studies, which is just at the high school level, it's government. So again, showing where we compare within our area districts. The 2020 target range is 375 to 500 for social studies. We are performing at 409.1 for all students and 366 in our subgroup achievement. For college and career readiness, there are 6 standards, and they're kind of grouped into 3 standards. See, the first set of 3, CCR standards 1 through 3, look at how graduates are scoring on either the ACT, ACT work keys, SAT, or Compass. The highest score is used for each graduate. we are earning all possible points for this college and career readiness standard and are earning points through the 2020 target. The junior ACT data was shared with the board back in August. This data is compiled from graduates, but I had not shared the graduate ACT data because we didn't have it at that time. So the next slide that I will show after I go through the rest of the standards will be the graduate ACT data. CCR Standard 4 looks at the percent of graduates scoring a qualifying score on an AP exam, a technical skills assessment, or receiving college credit through early college dual enrollment or approved dual credit classes. We earned all of our possible points and are earning our points through the 2020 target. The AP data that connects to this standard was shared with the board during the August presentation. I do have a summary slide of our AP scores that I'll show a little bit later. CCR Standard 5-6 looks at the percent of graduates who attended post-secondary education training who are in the military within 6 months of graduation, and the percent of graduates who are employed within 6 months of graduation. We earned all possible points and are earning points through the 2020 target. However, you'll notice that the data at the bottom, our percent has decreased, and that was because our unknown graduates increased from last year. So there were some graduates that weren't in college, and we weren't able to make contact with them to find out if they were working. Had we been able to make contact, and if they were working, we would have been able to get credit for them. And in 2015, DESE changed that criteria. There's an asterisk under the 2015 data, and that was the first year that DESE allowed any job placement to count towards the standard. In the past, it used to be you had to be a career technical education completer and be working in that same job field, which was a very stringent requirement. And so in 2015, DESE changed it and said, no, we're going to give credit for any student who is working within 6 months of graduating college. So that certainly is a plus for any students who, if they're choosing not to be in a 2-year, 4-year college or the military or technical college. And so again, the reason you'll see that decrease from 15 to 16 is we just had our unknowns. We had students that we weren't able to get hold of. So this is our ACT data, and it's a summary of our graduate ACT data from 2012 through 2016. And it shows how our district, our graduates, compare to the state of Missouri and the nation over the past 5 years. Our average graduate ACT composites decreased slightly, just 0.4 points. However, though, our composite is the highest in St. Charles County school districts. And this next slide was taken from the presentation back in August. So this is a 2 data points here with our advanced placement data. So the percentage of students scoring a 3 or higher on the AP exam, and then the percent of exams scoring 3 or higher, because some students take more than one AP exam. And this is the students who score 3 or higher is one of the points that we earn under that college and career standard 4. Or we also earn points if they didn't score 3 or higher, but they got to be in the class, we'll earn points that way as well. So as you can see, we had a slight decrease in our percent of exams scoring 3 or higher, but an increase in our students scoring 3 or higher. Attendance is one of our standards on the APR, and you might remember with MSIP 5, the districts had to change the way they looked at attendance rates. The DESE expectation is that we have our students, 90% of our students attending 90% of the time. And as you can see from this data, our students are exceeding that expectation on average. And graduation is the last standard on the APR. I've included both the 4-year and 5-year rate. I believe in the August data presentation, one of the board members asked about our 5-year rate, so I wanted to include that here tonight for you. And we've earned all 30 points based on our 4-year graduation rate, which increased from 2015, and we are earning points in the 2020 target. And I will just note, in case you're wondering about the 5-year graduation rate, it is calculated the same as the 4-year rate, except that it includes both the 4- and the 5th-year graduates in the 5th-year cohort. So this is a summary overview of our achievement data with areas where we've increased, decreased, or no change in data. I'll give you a second to take a glance at that. Strengths and celebrations. Based on the APR data, we have shown growth in the following areas. Our overall MPI for MAP scores within the state, math and social studies and our MAP scores, our AP enrollment, our AP exam participation, our 90/90 attendance rate, and our graduation rate. Based on our data, we see opportunities for improvement in the following areas: ACT scores, AP scores, subgroup achievement, MAP science, and graduate follow-up. The last slide here shows a variety of some improvement strategies. Just a few of the strategies that we have in place to support the opportunities for improvement. Offering ongoing high-quality professional development, focusing on curriculum and instruction. And most importantly, the work that we're doing this year is centered around classroom instruction that works, that helps teachers to hone their skills on how we teach, the instructional strategies that are used how we teach. And we want to make sure we are exposing all of our students to the ACT test sooner. So in the fall, all of our sophomores took a practice ACT exam. And that data is used to inform potential action steps and also can be used to help identify students to take the ACT prep class the following year. We have our curriculum writing teams embedding ACT-like assessment questions into the high school curriculum where appropriate. Our high schools have added specific intentional action steps into their school improvement plans, focusing on advanced placement scores. Implementing balanced literacy with fidelity through the units of study at the elementary level. And implementing reader-writer workshop, which you heard about tonight in our 6th grade ELA classes. This year, DESE was able to give us reports called item benchmark descriptions. So it's data that helps us to identify areas of strength from our MAP test from last year and potential areas that we need to focus on. And so we are using the item benchmark descriptor reports to determine focus areas for growth in tested areas, for standard tots, and also looking at question types. And then certainly implementing strategies to decrease the unknowns on the 180-day follow-up. Just had a meeting last week about that to ensure that we have those plans in place. And that's what I have tonight for the summary version of our workshop. There is another PowerPoint that has a lot more data in there. That's the full PowerPoint that's in the board docs. So any questions at this time?
I have one. So on page 7, the math, did you say that the target was 390? I'm just curious because it looks like there may only be like 4 districts in the entire state that even.
Yeah, math is it's 392. Oh, thanks, Vicki. The 2020 target range goes from 392.8 to 500. Go slide 5, I believe, or no, slide 4. So you can see that math that within the 2020 target range, which districts then that kind of correlates that are performing at the 2020 target level. Within all students, and no one is meeting that 2020 in subgroup, and then in all students, it's just Lindbergh, Clayton, and Ladue.
You know, as
we are moving in the right direction. We had increases in in our math assessments this year.
We're looking at it in Parkwood and Rockwood, which is
You know, as I look at this data, and it continues to improve, but one of the most important pieces of that data is a 95.67% graduation rate, which is outstanding. That's our goal, is to get everybody on the stage, get that diploma, and move on to bigger and better things. And I'm just so proud of that number. That number has really improved in our district and continues to, you know, break through barriers. And obviously our target is 100%. I mean, that should always be our target, is to get every one of our kids that come here across that stage for graduation. So great work. Board, do you have any other questions on this, Mr. Summer?
Just a few follow-up questions. If we could go back to slide 11, which is the ACT composite scores. Just so I understand, as a member of a Board of Education, our scores have slipped slightly the last couple of years, but hasn't it been 2 years that all juniors now are required to take the ACT test?
Yes.
And that's reflected on these scores?
Yes.
Okay. And then my other question, if we could just jump up to 13 real quick. In regards to the APR score, it's my understanding that DESE now is only looking at the 4-year graduation rate and not the 5, 6, or 7-year graduation rates. Is that right?
They will give you the points that you've earned, whichever is the highest. 4, 5, 6, or 7 in the APR document.
Okay.
So I can double check to see if that has changed.
Okay, and I know we have some 5. Do we have a lot of 6 and 7s in our district?
Yeah, it's just, yeah, you can see that little, there's only a 1/10 of an increase. I can pull it up and double check.
That's fine.
Okay, yeah, but it's not a huge difference.
Actually, I was referring to the number of students.
Yeah, it's not that,
Okay.
not that great, but I can pull it up, Mike.
When you get a chance.
Yep.
And Madison, I'm not going to ask any more questions, so.
And Mark, just to piggyback on your comment about the graduation rate, I think I was, I don't believe I was at the board meeting, but I believe I watched the board meeting where the best practice was the transition coach. And so I think that is a great practice to have Deb Mason work with the students who, for a variety of reasons, choose to drop out, but after a little bit of time, reach back out to them to talk about options to come back to high school. And we looked at that data recently. And I want to say last year she captured about half of those students to get back into school. And so just that right there in itself is a great program to help impact our graduation rate and do what's good for kids to get them graduated when things aren't going and they need to leave, but to get them back at some point. So I really appreciate that work that she does.
Well, thank you. The next item is our financial planning, and you know, I'm disappointed that we even have to have this meeting tonight. It saddens me. We put this on our calendar to address these items if in the event that the Prop Howell did not pass. It did not, and so the board is going to have some discussions tonight about what are some things that we can do to address the financial concerns in our school district. I would ask that each board member be polite and share your ideas and thoughts, and all ideas and thoughts are open for discussion, and be respectful. There is so much that goes into a child's education that the community doesn't know about. Small little things that we do, ELA programs, things that cost money. And that's what gets us to our target of 95% graduation. And it'll be hard to sustain that. I mean, I'm hopeful that we can, but it'll be hard to sustain that. And, you know, I didn't want to have this meeting tonight. I was hoping that we could skip this workshop and start planning for our future, but we have to plan for our future now and work with the taxes that have been afforded to us going forward. These are not easy decisions, and that's why we're spending the time in workshop. Workshop is no decisions are made tonight. We just have discussions, run some ideas past the administration, they run some ideas past us, and then we thoughtfully consider all the items before us. I received a number of emails from teachers, parents, all voicing the same opinion that it's just not a good thing, and everyone has some ideas, and we certainly read every email. I printed all the emails out that I received from folks, and I certainly appreciate them, and your input is certainly welcome at any time, and I probably speak for the entire board there. We certainly want to be thoughtful and considerate when we make tough decisions, and we hope that you don't hold those decisions against us. We're making these decisions to the best of our ability to try and educate kids to our abilities based on our revenues that have been forwarded to us. And we've put this proposition in front of the voters twice, and it's been rejected. So it's a clear message, and I just would hope that we get through this with no animosity, and just understand that these are not decisions we want to make, or decisions we want to even have a discussion about. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Mary Hendricks Harris to begin that discussion.
I think you said many of the things I wanted to say in my introductory remarks, but I just would also like to remind everyone, not just the board, that prior to this discussion, we have cut out of our budget over the last 2 years over 90 positions and $12 million. And we have cut things like classroom teachers, work days for staff, paras, professional development, assessments, tutoring, supplies. We've halted our computer refresh, our cabinet's taken a furlough day, we have cut curriculum materials and textbooks, COC hearing officer, building budgets have been dramatically cut. Our PLC leaders, department chair time, and other teacher leaders' times have been cut, and we have already made it cut to extracurriculars. So part of the Prop Howell levy was about reinstating some of those things. And I think it's very difficult when we hear things like, if you don't make additional cuts, you didn't need those things. We need these things. We needed those things. We need to have them reinstated. And we bring to you some additional cuts tonight. And as Mark said, this is just a beginning point of what we're hoping will be an open dialogue. This is the first of our conversations. We are very anxious to hear the board's direction and your thoughts on some of the things we put together. Having said that, I will quickly talk you through the list of our ideas for tonight, and again, just some preliminary things. So you can see at the top of the list, the first two items address extracurriculars. This would eliminate district funding for extracurriculars at both elementary and middle school. We would make some cuts to high school, and at high school initiate a yet-to-be-determined activity fee. There would be some sort of fee structure initiated at the high school level. We have attempted as best we could to minimize the certified cuts. Again, trying to keep the cuts as far away from the classroom as possible. So you can see the certified FTE there is $480,000. That would include some cuts to administration. We would restructure the AIP program. It's less than ideal to have students with alcohol and drug offenses on campus during school hours, but we have come to this, and we can utilize the ALC program during the daytime and some staffing at Francis Howell Union. We would no longer provide transportation on transition days, and I think, again, this is one of those key supports we've been able to put in place that we no longer will be able to. So in the past, 6th and 9th grade students have been able to attend transition days, and the transportation was provided to them. We know that those transitions to those grade levels are key and very important in their success as students. We would no longer be able to provide that transportation, and attendance will likely decrease. Security cuts would come from high school, specifically the security firm. We would need to make some reductions there. We have put some things in place in regards to the entry vestibules, cameras, and buzz-in systems, which will assist some of that. We would cut additional curriculum and assessment materials by $150,000. Some capital projects would go on hold. We do release teachers for training, and we do consider that a priority. You heard that in the workshop model here tonight about those professional development days that were required to get that started. We would considerably reduce the release days that are provided for training, and as a result, some training is also going to get cut. Finally, after much discussion, we believe we could study and implement walk zones for next school year. This would require students who live within a mile of school to provide their own transportation. We would need to study in depth this proposal. We would look for subdivisions that have sidewalks and do not cross major highways or streets and are walkable. We would then be able to consolidate some routes and have a reduction of very rough guesstimate right now, about $250,000, and that really is a rough guesstimate. We have not been able to study that part of the proposal in any depth. So the plan, these thoughts would keep our balances in the 17 to 15% range, which is in board policy for the next 3 years. Those balances could be higher if revenue comes in higher and expenditures are less, as Mr. Supple mentioned earlier. We would need additional revenue or make additional cuts prior to the 2021 school year. This does not address future raises, but does include major capital projects currently on the facilities list. The bottom of the page, you can see some of those things that we have had to cut or put on hold that we feel like we no longer can. And so part of what we need to cut is in order to reinstate some of the previous cuts. We can no longer not refresh our technology. That's been put on hold for 2 years. It's part of what our students need to be successful. It's part of what we need for accreditation. It's part of what our students need to graduate with for college and career readiness. We will have to reinstate technology to the tune of $1.5 million. Tutoring, I know that we have throughout the course of the last 2 years had many conversations about how important tutoring is for our students, and we would like to reinstate that. And finally, we have seen an increasing need in the emotional needs of our students across our district. At one time, our safety task force had recommended an ESC at every level. We have not been able to put that in place, and I will tell you that it's not working. So many of our elementary middle schools only have 1 to 2 days of educational support counseling a week, and this does not provide the level of support our students, our teachers, or our administrators need. We have a story from this week about one elementary school that has 12 students that are spending 50% of their day in crisis, taking time from classroom teachers and administrators, as well as causing some trauma for the other students. The emotional needs of our students have gotten greater and greater, and we cannot have our support counselors traveling. So those would be the list of things that we would need to add to the budget that would be different from this school year. And I've gone through the cuts. So at this point, just open it up for conversation, and we'll be listeners.
And I just want to piggyback off something Dr. Hendricks-Harris. I made a trip around the school district to every single school in 1 week and heard a very common theme amongst our elementary principals of this need that we have for the kids that are experiencing, a lot of things that either home life or just within themselves. And so it certainly is, it's not a need that we're just wanting to add. It's a need that's taking away from education in our elementary schools. So obviously it's not an item that the board wants to ignore, and I certainly think that when you, even though baby's waking up, even though that we're experiencing a financial crisis, we also have crises that are happening in our buildings, and that's an important need. One of the questions I had on the extra curricular, is that an offset of income, the cut?
That would be a combination of the fee structure and making additional cuts.
Okay, so it's $250,000 cut plus an increase in revenue.
No, that's the.
No,
that's
it's
the net.
that would be the net.
That's the net, okay, all right. And then, so the security personnel is the folks that are sitting out in the white buildings outside our schools to let
Correct.
cars in, so that would go away?
Well, the high school principals told us that they need somebody at the guardhouse to control access to the campus. But they've had additional security personnel that they think may not be needed now because access to the building is so restricted, especially now that we've reconfigured the entrances at Central and at North.
And that kind of brings me to a question. When I drive through the high schools, often, and they take down your license plate, they ask you what you're here for, and you drive in. They get double checked when they enter the building, so they're being buzzed in. They're stating their name, what they're there for, what the purpose is. So I'm just trying to understand what the reasoning is behind the access to the property. Is it more of a deterrent, or is it?
I think it serves as a deterrent, and our high school principals told us when we met with them that the guards are actually able to keep kids off campus who don't belong. So somebody drives up and says, hey, I graduated last year, I just want to stop in. No. Do you have an appointment with somebody? No. So they stop a lot of things before they get to the front door.
They do that in high school? I thought they did in elementary school. I didn't know they did in high school.
We love our teachers here in Francis Howell.
One other question on the capital projects hold. What does that list look like from a projection standpoint, from a number standpoint, overall, and what does it need? What's needed to fund the upkeep of our buildings at the current level?
Well, we have been budgeting $1.5 million to $2 million a year for the general upkeep and maintenance of our buildings, and of course we've taken some reductions in that over time, as we have with other areas of our budget. $200,000 that listed here is not any specific project, but it just means we'll do a little bit less of everything. So there'll be maybe not every parking lot that needs it is going to get sealant, and maybe we won't replace as many sections of sidewalk, and we'll limit our ADA modifications to those that are necessary based on the specific student population, and not just anticipating some ADA accommodations, bathroom remodels and so forth. So it's across a whole spectrum of our minor capital projects work. We'd simply do a little bit less of everything.
But from your standpoint, how far does it put us behind when because we're not even budgeting the $1.5 million anymore?
Correct. So I do think that we've done a good job of preserving to a large degree and not committing, I want to be careful here, but not repeating history by slashing, that the first thing you do is slash your capital expense as a way to avoid any operating expense reductions. And as a result, the district got itself into a terrible deferred maintenance status. And it took us 6 or 7 years to kind of get caught up. So we haven't made that mistake. We've made some reductions. We're not doing as much as we have, but we're also able to sustain that only because we focused so much on repairing the worst of the worst, and we had some luck with our bond issue funds and stretching them further than we thought, that we've been able to get to kind of keep treading water. So we're treading water, but still for a school district our size, 23 buildings, 3 million square feet under roof, we don't approach the amount that we ought to be spending on our buildings on a regular basis. We even in the quote-unquote good times, we didn't budget enough money to maintain our buildings the way that we should, if you're thinking about ongoing operating expenditures.
So let me re-ask it in a different form.
Okay.
What is that number now for we're budgeting for? I don't recall.
500.
Is it 500,000?
500,000 is what we transfer from the operating fund to the capital fund. We also allocate 6 cents of the tax levy each year to our capital fund, so that's about $1.5 million. So somewhere, you know, and if you take a look at the actual results, we will change the amount that we transfer based on what work was actually completed and what the tax levy generated and what the difference in that would be.
So that $500,000 represents the transfer amount.
It's a placeholder for the transfer.
So if I could ask a question, this kind of leads in a great segue. As a member of the Board of Education, one thing that would be beneficial to me is not only to see the dollar amounts, but the percentage of the proposed items here versus what we're currently spending. So for example, the first one listed there, extracurricular at the elementary and middle school, that'd be 100% of our current budget. The $200,000 for capital might be 10% currently of what we're spending for capital. The transition busing and the walk zones, which is $290,000, is just a small portion of the $11 million we spend on transportation. So I think as a board member and for the community, that might be beneficial in addition to the dollar amount. And then the other thing with the certified and non-certified full-time equivalents. We've got dollar amounts suggested at this point, proposed, but if we could actually have an idea, are we talking 50 non-certified, 25 non-certified, just an idea of how many positions we truly are talking about with the proposed items?
One of the reasons that we have not included specific positions or FTE numbers in this plan is we have not had an opportunity to talk to those individuals that might be affected. And so throughout that traditional staffing plan, before that plan would go live to the public, we would have an opportunity to talk to those individuals who would be affected, so they would hear that first from their immediate supervisor. And so we just wanted to be careful in presenting information today so that we did not create any undue stress to those.
And I'm not asking for specific positions. I'm just asking, $480,000 for a full-time equivalent. Obviously, that's less than 10 positions, so just a number.
So I've got a question. What is the cost for one day to be open as a district? Approximate. I mean, let's say no kids are in school and we're the week between Christmas and New Year's. What would be the cost of us being open each day?
So really what you're talking about is not a school in session day. Correct. You're not asking us to add all that up. So, go ahead and do that math. You gave it to me, Lisa, but I didn't add it up.
So I can answer that as far as a staffing point. I don't know if you're closing the buildings down, what increased cost that would be. But as far as the staff that works, so we're talking about a lot of our staff is already off during that time. So it's a small amount of staff. But if we were to close for 4 days, I think through that Christmas break, it would be a savings of about $373,000. So divide that by 4 and we'll get a cost of a day.
That's good enough
93.
at the 4 days. I'd like to see us consider closing down the administration building, the school buildings, whatever we can that week between Christmas and New Year's. If that's $300 and something thousand, that keeps us from having to cut all extracurriculars out of elementary and middle.
There's a, we are open to taking a look at all those. I just want to make sure that the board has other information. There will be some sports activities that are scheduled, and our buildings are typically open over those break periods. They may hold a tournament. We oftentimes will schedule certain maintenance repairs that can't be done during the course of the school year. That gives us a couple days when there's nobody in school where we can do some of those things. Those would be the type of things that we wouldn't be able to do in the future if the building was completely closed.
I think that number would be somewhat less because some of what you are describing is already figured in. So there are some within those FTE, the support staff and the certified staff. We did figure on some fewer days for some groups of people. So it won't be $300,000, but it'll be a number out there.
So some of the staffing cuts that we're looking at are just hours. These aren't additional people. My biggest concern
minimal
is that the climate of our district and our staff is just going to continue to decrease as they're worried about whether or not they're going to have a job the next year. So that's my biggest concern, is figuring out ways to, we don't have money for raises that I'm aware of, but at least if they didn't have to worry about whether or not they're going to have a job, I'd like to see that kind of stability for our staff. So I'm not thrilled with this list of cuts.
Keep in mind that even on the actually certified and non-certified both, we get retirements each year. So sometimes it's not that number represents somebody that's retiring, but it certainly doesn't mean that we would have the money to replace, or if we have a hiring freeze, then that freeze would be in place. And it may not be people losing their jobs, they might just be retiring. But bear in mind that leaves more and more responsibility for our teachers, for our certified staff, that's taken up that responsibility. So, you know, it's a number, but we also have retirements that take place. You know, my only question with that is, you know, the closing the buildings, it affects a small percentage of our school district as far as folks. And is that fair to impose that on the folks that are just usually working during that time period? I would have a hard time with that because there's certainly folks that are custodians that count on that income. There's secretaries that count on that income, but then you also have your administrators usually working during that time period. So this excludes our teacher group. So I don't know that I think that would be a fair way of looking at it if you're looking at across the board cuts.
My thought on that would be that, so you're talking about a small number of people being impacted. However, it's an even larger number than what would be the impact of cutting all elementary and middle school extracurriculars. I mean, you're talking about a whole lot more people there that are students. I don't want to hurt our staff, but I'm looking at this saying, okay, well, these are going to, this is definitely going to hit the kids. This is going to hit the kids. The transition day buses, what's the cost for transition day? If we don't have buses, we probably shouldn't even bother with a transition day because we're going to have such a decreased attendance if we're not providing the transportation. So are there things like that those are going to impact 2 grades versus 9 grades? Just kind of curious about those sorts of things.
And I think that there is much additional cost to those transition days. People are already on contracted time during those days. So it would not be a cut there. It's the 6th and 9th grade teachers take time out of what would normally be preparation time to transition those students over.
So I want to thank you for taking a look at the cuts that we're even here discussing tonight. Like we've talked about, it's not an easy thing. And so as we start the conversation, I'd also like to look at opportunities for revenue. So I know that's minimal, but right now we are talking about $20,000, $40,000. So as we look at potential for revenue, one of the items as we discussed is the elementary and middle school extracurricular activities. So we're looking at a fee structure for the high school. Is it something we could consider for the elementary and middle school as well? So if we eliminate the after-school program, but there's a group of students that are willing and able, do they have the opportunity? Can we provide that? So that's one thing I'd like to consider. The second thing is I think we do rent out our facilities. And so are we charging a rate that is comparable to other districts for those facilities? And is there any opportunity to recognize some more gains there?
Let me answer one question at a time. So in regards to the extracurricular, I do think that we could look at a fee structure at elementary and middle. One of the challenges in any of the fee structures that we're talking about will be the students who can afford and the students who can't. And so that will be something that we will have to figure out moving forward, but it could certainly be a point of conversation. We have been having conversations about our facility and facility rental. We have a couple of our team members that are working on a comparison of our facility usage to other districts. They're putting a chart together for Mr. Supple and I to review. We do charge, but it's a minimal fee right now, depending on what you are looking at renting and how nice the facility is. So there is a range of fees. So it is something that we have heard through feedback throughout the tax levy that is something we should consider revisiting our current rates.
I would also add that one of the things with the high school program is that the cuts assume that when we're talking about the fee to participate, is that the program is going to be there, and what we're doing is helping to defray the cost of that program slightly. And I think there's a difference if you have to now pay for the entire program with a fee. We're not anticipating that our high school athletes are going to pay a fee that'll be large enough to pay for the entire cost of the program. We're saying the program is going to remain in place, and we'll defray the cost of it by charging some level of fee. And that's different than, I'm not going to have yearbook, and now I am going to have yearbook at a middle school level, for example. I think that the potential fee to continue that at the middle or elementary, based on what we've looked at here, would be substantial for the number of participants.
Could we, like on that elementary and middle school, is there a way that, because it's been brought up several times to me, is there a way that, you know, kind of like the band boosters that raise money, is there a way that parents can get together and raise money, fundraise, and still implement all this and pay for it entirely with all that? Or does it have to be equal across every school? That was my question, that was brought up. So say if we would have it at, just hypothetical at Barnwell, but yet Hollenbeck didn't have a parents group to do that. Can we think outside the box and these parents figure out a way to make sure their children get that? Can we do that or can we not?
I think we can, and I think it will be a challenge. So I think the example that you gave is a perfect one. Hollenbeck being a much smaller school, wanting to have a robotics team, the fundraising is going to be much more difficult than at a bigger school or a school with a larger PTO.
Is there a way to go out into our community and get more community support? Not so much the parents in that, but the businesses in that, you know, this is what we want for these kids, solicit, and see if we can get it. Like, I know the robotics, the ones that went to national, they solicited some businesses and they got money to be able to participate in that national competition. So is there a way that, you know, we start thinking outside the box and we start going into that community and saying, okay, the tax dollars aren't here, how can you help us? Can we put a committee together that would actually start doing that? Not individual parents, but maybe a committee that can go after businesses and different things and to see if we can generate something for the kids.
Well, the one thing that, and they're all great ideas, but you're creating another layer of staff or volunteers that you may or may not be able to count on to get that done.
But you have to start somewhere, Lance.
Right. The only thing I want to say regarding fees is it's a very difficult thing to implement, and I'm not really sure if we're set up for this type of implementation this quickly. I think we have to really think about how we go about this. There are folks that in our school district that won't be able to afford that, and what do you do at that point? Do you say no? You can't play because you couldn't afford to play, and I don't know if that's fair as well. I think there's maybe an activity fee that we could take a look at as a starting point, and that would be an activity fee to ride the bus, to participate in sports, to participate in band clubs, things like that. And just like anything else, you take a look at that number each and every year based on where you think your percentage of cost are. And I don't know how much this $250,000 at the high school. What percentage of that is that? 25% of our budget amount right now, the high school. What percentage is that?
What percent does the $250,000 represent of our extracurricular?
At the high school.
Well, if we think just in terms of I guess I'm thinking of two things. If we think of our extra duty budget, this is about 10% of our extra duty budget. Now that's all of the positions across the district that are stipend through our extra duty structure. But if you think about
But this
If you
is
think
not-
about just the high school extracurriculars and what the activity department budget is, this, that would be probably, that would be a much smaller percentage because we probably spend close to $1 million between the 3 high schools.
Okay, so that's over and above staff.
Yes, yes.
So it's approximately 2.2 million at the high
Well,
school?
the extra, of course, currently there are positions that are not at the high school level that receive a stipend through the extra duty schedule. So the extra duty schedule that I shared with you would be the total budget, not just for high school.
So extra duty, extra. We don't really have money for extra. So if we've got millions of dollars in high school extras, and then we want to cut all the extras out of elementary and middle, I can tell you that buses, that's going to hurt property values quickly. Probably faster than anything we could even, anything else we could even consider. Could you guys hear me all right? That buses would hurt our property values if we lost them very quickly. However, I've never heard anybody say, oh, I got to move there because they have high property values because they got a great football team. Don't kill me. I don't want to get rid of football. However, if we're talking about these kinds of cuts, we have to have everything on the table. It's not fair because elementary and middle school may seem like the low-lying fruit because those kids aren't going to show up to this meeting. But it doesn't make sense to me that we would cut 10% out of the high school extra budget and completely cut elementary and middle.
So it sounds like a lot of the conversation has been about not cutting elementary and middle school extracurricular.
Yeah.
So just summarizing that. Moving forward, we'll make note of that.
You got it. You got it.
We will make note of that.
Okay. This one? Probably not. Doesn't matter, I'll talk loud. I guess I have a little different perspective than some of these things that we're talking about here. Okay, is that better? In looking at the numbers here that we're talking about that we need to reinstate, it's like $2.6 million. As I said earlier, with our minimal increase from CPI and new growth, we're projecting 2.2, but that's probably a little low. We could probably roll in, not cut any of these items. We could roll in the technology, the tutoring, the additional educational support positions, and still meet our district board standards for having our 16% reserves. That would kick the can down the road an additional year. It would give us time to get a task force or community, some type of committee in place, which is what I've been saying we've needed to do all along. We need to get more input. We're getting input from a very small percentage of the community. I read all my emails just as Mark and the rest of the board. We all read those. That is a good insight. It's just like the gentleman on the board update said, we need a hotline or task force. We need a funding idea hotline or a cuts idea hotline that we can review so that everybody can call up and give us an idea. Everybody in this room here has a different idea of what could be cut, what couldn't be cut. My kids have all graduated from Howell. I have a grandson that's part of the early childhood program. I know that if we're talking about these extracurriculars and stuff, if you have a child that participates in band or speech and drama or any of the sports, you're well aware that the district only pays for a small portion of the cost that it is to play that sport because there's always fundraisers or additional things that they need. And then you've got all the additional expenses that you've got for if it's for the different shoes that they need or different uniforms and stuff. So, that's already a burden on people. And, like it or not, there's a lot of kids that the only reason that they're in school and one of the reasons that they want to come to school every single day is for those extracurriculars, whether or not it be band after school, or whether or not it's speech and drama, or whether or not it's one of the sports. That's one of the reasons that they're engaged and they're active, and that's why we have such a high graduation rate, because we value those extracurriculars. And I don't see how we can cut those extracurriculars. At this point in time, I don't see how we could add additional cost on those extracurriculars, because those kids in those programs are already paying a lot extra in addition to those things. We can, the numbers are there. For this year, we're good. We can ride this out for the next year. At some point in time, we will pass a tax levy. And we can get some additional input from the community, get some additional input via task force, via community engagement, something, and all together we can come up with a plan and get this passed. But there's no reason to make any cuts immediately that are going to affect our kids. And that's the reason I'm here, is to protect our kids. I've said repeatedly that busing cannot be on the table unless we are going to spend many millions of more dollars to make our schools accessible to kids and accessible to traffic patterns and flows. There's no way we can even talk about doing that. It's a nice large number that we can look at, but it would not be safe for us to cut busing with the current configuration of our schools. It's just not doable. Somebody's going to get hurt. But these are hard decisions, but we have a 2-year period that we can evaluate these changes, reflect on these changes, come up with some ideas. There's no need to do everything 2 weeks after an election. I think we need to address the situation, but we don't have to address it today.
Do we have the turf? I know our turf fields are going to have to be replaced sometime the next 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. Do we have that figured into the budgets at all?
The Facilities Committee each year prioritizes the major capital projects, and so turf field replacement, last year's report listed it as one of the 7 items that had been identified, but there was no specific funding stream identified for any of the major capital projects. So there's a difference between sealing the parking lot, replacing a broken piece of sidewalk, putting up a new stall in the bathroom to make it ADA accessible. Those are operating capital, if you will. Do you understand? And then major capital, redoing the C building. We perceive that as a need. We've identified that we need to think seriously about restructuring, providing a better climate, HVAC climate within that building, et cetera. We've identified that, and we think we've pigeonholed a number around what that might be, but we don't have a funding source for it.
So that's pretty troubling to me, because we just keep kicking the can. We don't make any more cuts. And then 5 years from now, we've got turf fields falling apart, buildings falling apart, because we can't pay to fix them? Am I missing something?
Yeah, one of the things that we've done over time is to, not in any dramatic way, but to provide a small cushion within our capital budget, within our capital reserves, to accommodate if we would have a catastrophic event that would not be something that was covered by insurance, let's say. So I'm not too worried about finding the funds necessary to address an emergent issue that has to be done if it's a major capital project, because we have some reserves in our capital fund. But we can't begin to allocate those reserves to the projects that have been identified, because those are things that we'd like to do if we had the money to do it. Really, it's, you know, just like you run your household. You might have $1,000 in your checking account, but you don't know if the washing machine's going to go out. So you keep $1,000 and you don't go buy the flat screen TV that you'd like to get. I think that's where we are. So we have some reserves in our capital fund that we can address. So if it came to the point where, you know, at Howell High School is the first turf field to go in, so it's been in use longer, and logic would dictate that it'll need to be replaced first. If it came to the point where we had to replace that and we had not yet changed our funding stream, I believe that we would have reserves that would allow us to address that as a emergent project. It would reduce our reserves, but.
And what if then the next year we had to replace more?
Well, yeah, if once the ball starts rolling, Mrs. Walker, I think you're exactly right. We certainly don't have enough reserves to address all of those needs, and you know, I think that's where we need to begin to have conversation about a long-term capital plan. Mr. LaFatte has been very proactive. He's mentioned this on probably since the day we began these conversations, to begin to think about the eventual replacement cost of our turf fields. And I think the Facilities Committee's been very proactive in identifying those major projects that we have. We kind of have a little bit of a perfect storm in that we haven't had any relief on the operating side, and our debt service side is constrained by the fact that a lot of the bond issues that were issued when the district was growing rapidly are all coming due in the next couple of years. The final payments were kind of pushed out to the end of the cycle, and so we have a very heavy debt service schedule that isn't completely supported by the current levy that we have. So we don't have room on a no tax levy basis to issue additional bonds in the very short term. But at some point, I think that the answer to your question is to develop a long-range capital plan, identify what those needs are, and as we did in 2008, you know, get 78 or whatever the number is, $1 million to address our capital needs.
Yeah, you took a lot of what I was going to say. Being on facilities, we've been discussing this, and there's quite a bit of stuff. And that's why even looking at the 200,000 on hold, that might not be realistic, because there is some immediate needs that could happen at any time. But just since I've been here for 2 years, I've been doing nothing but cutting and cutting, and it's, you know, it's to be fiscally responsible, we need to act on it. You know, not necessarily this year. I'm leaning towards maybe, because we approved this budget for this year, but with the cuts we've just made over the last 2 years already, I'm pretty intrigued about the walk zones and really trying to look at more avenues that way. That won't directly affect the classroom experience as much. You know, of course it will. Maybe expand it, wider areas, what we need to do to actually make it possibly work without, because looking at these non-certified and certified staff on top of took so many notes here on I mean, it's like 1.1 million on top of the 90 positions and 12 million in the last 2 years. It's been nothing but cuts, and it's really depressing. And I don't want to rush to any judgments here on all this stuff. I think we need to get, you know, more in details over some more, you know, discussions.
You know, the one thing I've been thinking about, and trust me, you know, don't be a hater, you elementary principals, but when I look at the ad of the 10 ESC counselors, and I think of the number of students that's going to affect, and I look at the cost associated with that, at $800,000, and we have 17,000 students throughout our school district, I just have to think about whether that's justifiable at this time when you're taking a look at the smaller number of students that may have an impact on. You know, I don't know what the number is. I'd have to have a better understanding of what that activity is that we're seeing at the elementary level for that support, because I, in my mind, have to justify the expense of that when I take a look at some of the other things that we're considering cutting. I want to make sure that, in my mind, that's a good thought process of spending those funds. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure that the support is needed, but I did hear it from every elementary principal that I visited. But the number of students that affects, it's got to be astronomical from a dollar standpoint. And I don't know what that is, but it's a big number, $800,000, and I don't know how many students that really affects. I'm not saying that we're going to turn our back on the needs, because I know that causes some disruption and takes people away from their jobs. But I have to really justify if that's an expenditure that we can afford right now.
So I look at things just a little bit differently, I think, and it's good because we have a diverse board here. I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Mr. Lang said. I came onto the board in April of 14, thank you. And at that time, I came onto the board with a projected deficit of over $18 million. So right now for next year on the forecast, we've got a projected deficit of $1.4 million. So that tells you what kind of cuts that we've made since the time that I've been on the board. So to echo Chad, that's hard. It's really hard. And just as I've said in several conversations with people and media, we've already cut the fat. We've cut the muscle. We are down to bone, and every decision we make will be hard. And just like the emails that we received, don't cut band, please cut band. Don't cut busing, please cut busing. We're going to see that across our board as well. What I have to say from my perspective is I look at my responsibility as a board member to be the gutter guards on the bowling alley. You, as an executive team, need to stay down the middle of the lane, and my job is to keep you from going off one side or the other. So to me, what that equates here is I would like a balanced budget. There's things that we have to put back into the budget because we've cut them and they have to come back in now. There's no one better that's going to understand where we can truly make some of those small cuts and the larger cuts than your entire staff, students, and community. You have connections with them. So as you look forward to opportunities for revenue and opportunities for cuts, my request is a balanced budget. If we are lucky enough to have increased revenues, we'll wind up with a surplus, and that we can put towards our capital funds. If we're not, we're going to stop whittling away at our reserve funds. So that's my opinion. I'd like to give you a target. The target is a balanced budget. How you get there, I would like you to seek a lot of feedback. Staff, students, community members. It's a tough job.
I know we've had a few conversations about timelines tonight, and don't disagree with what many people have said about needing to seek some input. Our first timeline is staffing, and the intent is to bring that to you as we always have in December. And so that is our first big challenge in regards to
We lost an election a little over, I think, 10 days now, and about 10 days now. And, next month we need to have the staffing decision made for next school year anyway. The other opportunity that we can point out is that we are planning, as the board knows, to do strategic planning this year. And so that is a great opportunity to engage lots of people over the course of 6 months or better in regards to what are the ideas for financial planning and cuts. But that input would be very difficult to get by December. I do think we can do some things in the short term, very short term things. I know in the past we have done some. If you have an idea, here is the email hotline kind of thing for some ideas. We certainly could do that by December. I think going out and meeting with groups is going to be very difficult by then.
So I have a suggestion. I don't think it would take all that long to put a survey together and send it to our staff. I've heard from several staff, there are things that they could live without. But if we're not asking them, then we don't know what those things are. So I'd like to see, and it could be very simple. Send out a survey to our staff and ask them for their suggestions. Maybe they'll come up with some great ideas. They probably will, because if they can come up with some great ideas, it'll save some jobs. And I don't see why we couldn't do that by December.
Well, the one thing I heard tonight, I heard the kick the can down the road verbiage, and I'm a strong believer in that we shouldn't do it anymore. I didn't want to move forward with the budget this year, but we did, and it seemed to be okay, worked out. I would like to see us take a look at a budget that is sustainable and something that we can live with for the next 3 to 4 years. Right now we don't have a sustainable budget. We have a moving target. We don't have a lot of room for error. If we have a boiler that goes out, if we have a major project that we have to address, there's just not a lot of room. So we didn't go out to the taxpayers because we're in good shape. And if that's what we're saying here tonight, then we shouldn't put it on the ballot. What I'm outlining to you and to the staff and to the community is we have to take a different direction, and how we go about doing our business needs to change. We need to start looking at things as, do we really need it? And I'll go back to the support counselors. I'm sure that we need them, but is it something that can we afford it? And how many students does that really impact? And is that something that we can afford to add during a period of time where we are cutting? And I don't want to add staff and then cut staff. It doesn't make sense to me. I'd soon just not add and figure out a way to make it work, whether you hire a floater that goes throughout the elementary schools to create coverage or whatever that need is. But I have a hard time making that decision on adding additional employees during this time period. I also have a hard time with kicking the can down the road on our current budget, because it's not sustainable. It's year to year, and yeah, you can project a fund balance, but keep in mind, we're not going to keep staff in our school district if we project a flat line increase of 0 for the next 5 years. We don't have sustainability in our budget right now, and we will lose good, young, bright employees. And then we're going to create a atmosphere in our school district that we're projecting 5 years of frozen salaries. Now, I'm not advocating that we increase pay every year, but we're showing nothing. Everybody's going to have increased cost at home, and we're showing no increases for the next 5 years in this budget. So, you know, my thought process is we really need to roll up our sleeves and get a budget that's sustainable, because we're not going to get any new revenues, at least in the next 2 years, unless this board plans a tax increase that I'm not aware of. But we need to pare it down. If we are asking for $14 million for the next school year, and we're having to do without that revenue, then we need to pare it down to the point where we have a sustainable situation. I don't think we do. And if we keep ignoring that fact as a board and as administration, as a district, then we're going to find ourselves in a deeper situation that we can't get out of. We have to fix it. We have to right-size this school district so it's sustainable. Right now it's not sustainable, looking at the numbers I see. So, I mean, I think we really need to think about this. And I don't think we really are. I think we're still kicking the can down the road with these dollar amounts. I'm afraid, I know it's bad news and it's not good news, but this isn't enough. We have to figure out another way to do business. And I'm not sure we've addressed that.
Mark, I don't disagree with you at all, and we do need to address it. You know, and just looking at what's on here, and I like what it says, you know, the security personnel reduction, cut possible to safety, you know, as you're reevaluating everything. But that needs to be done, unfortunately, that needs to be done to every single program. It needs to be reevaluated. What can we change? How can we make that more affordable? What else can we do? What can we do without of in that program, but still produce that program so that it's cutting and it's coming down to the best of the best at that point? You know, we've gotten rid of so much fluff in our, you know, which people would call fluff. But you need to find other sources of revenue. Of course, we know that. When we're looking at adding these things, and you know, my first thought is, oh, why do we have to do that? Well, I look at technology, and just in my own home, in finding out that my computer that isn't that old is out of date, and it wouldn't accept something that I needed to do. I had to go to the library and do it. Thank goodness the libraries were up to date. But how fast and how quickly technology is changing. And if you don't think technology is driving this world, we better really think again, because technology is there and these kids need to have some of the top notch. So, and replacing some of the older things that we do have, and I get that. Tutoring, I've gotten a lot of pros and cons about tutoring. We don't need it, we don't do this, we don't do that. Tutoring is an integral part of what we do as teachers to help these students, you know, perform, to do better. It may not impact every student, but it's going to impact the majority of the student. And then I look at the next one, the emotional and support, and I know that you're having a hard time wrapping your brain around it. I don't have a hard time wrapping my brain around it. I know what they do. I know you think it's a small number of kids it impacts, but it also impacts not only that student, other students and the teachers and the staff in each of those schools. So you may have one student that's having these difficulties, but it may impact 20 kids. It may scare the living daylights out of a child when they see something like that. So that child has been devastated by it. So it kind of rolls. So I understand that. I agree with that. I just, you know, do we need to check and make sure that 10 is going to do it? Can we do it with less than that? And then I agree with with you on going back to these teachers, doing that survey, finding out what is their ways, because, and I even think we should go as far as students, high school students, something that they've done during their tenure in school that really was, they felt was dumb or unnecessary. How do we know unless we ask them? And so a survey to even high school students would help that, especially the seniors in that, because they're ready to go on, but yet they may have ideas of something that they would have seen or could see how to do something better back then. We need to tap all of our resources. Those are our resources. When we go out and we talk to senior citizens and this and that, and I know sometimes I get real disturbed because they, you know, walk to school 5 miles in the snow uphill both ways. And I get that. But it's just, if you stop and you listen long enough to some of their thinking, we may be able to incorporate some of that, or maybe think differently about a different thing. And we need to be very vigilant in listening to our patrons, listening to our teachers, listening to our staff. How are we going to do this? We need a balanced budget. I am for a balanced budget. So we need to do that. So how can we, as a whole, as a community, as a district, students, teachers, parents, staff, board members, how can we do that? How can we come together? And we need to do that. And it's not going to happen overnight, but we need to come together, and we need to physically figure out what the cuts need to be. We need to take care of that. We need to keep the staff positive. We need to make sure we move forward in everything. But utmost is that staff needs to have the biggest input in how that structure. They're with those kids every day. They know the teaching strategy. You know, you give me any teacher who's and they're phenomenal teachers, they can do things with no budget. If they really so could, they would, because they're dedicated. We have so many dedicated teachers that just go ahead and do these things, and they're not asking for compensation. But we better figure out a way to get all of this taken care of so that we can be in a balanced budget and everything is equal. That's all I have to say now.
Just no. Can I do a time check? So we're at 10 o'clock. I worked a full day. I'm sure many people here with us have also. So I think, Mary, what I heard from you, though, is your immediate concern is that you need to put together a staffing plan for us.
Can I just add to
Yes,
that, just a timeline? So our plan would be to bring that staffing plan to you on December 15th, which means that board docs, getting that to you in time to review would be December 9th. So we have about 2 weeks after the holiday to really put that together and get that information to you. So that is really our first priority, in getting some direction as to how you would like for us to incorporate any kinds of reductions into that staffing plan.
And I know it's been idea to the past several years to make the staffing decisions in December. Typically, when we first got on the board, we were doing that in February, March. But don't hesitate to call a special board meeting if you need to, or use part of the January 5th evening that we're already getting together, if that's what it takes, since we're kind of in extraordinary situations right now, to take those opportunities and impose upon the board for an extra meeting if needed to get done what you guys need to do.
The only thing that I would add to that is that we need to make some decisions as a board so that it gives you guys direction. This is not direction. This is conversation. Okay, I want to make that very clear. This is just conversation. It's not direction. Direction is when the board makes a decision, and we need to understand. We need to give them a direction on how to staff, how to propose our budget going forward. Again, my opinion is we don't have a sustainable budget at all. And you know, to me, it's not a good way to continue your organization. We were going to have a organization with additional revenue. We had plans. We were going to start our process. We don't have that right now. I don't think this is enough if we were looking for $14 million in revenue. I mean, a balanced budget is one thing, but is it a program that's right-sized based on your revenue? And that's what you guys need to think about. That's what the board needs to think about. And I don't think it is. That's my opinion. And I'm only one board member. But I think we really need to ask ourselves that question. Is this budget sustainable, and is it right-sized the school district if we were asking for $14 million in additional revenue? That's my only thought in this thing, and I want to challenge you to take a look at that. Don't answer that question tonight, but take a look at it from a long-term perspective, and take a look at it like we're not going to get any more revenue, any additional revenues other than what's projected. And I don't think that we can continue to offer the program that we have, whether it's busing, whether it's additional ESC counselors, whether it's additional teachers or programs or course offerings, whatever that is. We need to pare it down and figure out, okay, these are our revenues, and this is how we're gonna move forward. That's what I would like to see before I make any decision. And that's what I would like to see. If the rest of the board doesn't want to see it, that doesn't matter. I want to see it. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, that we completely understand what it's going to look like in them out years. And I don't think right now we're there. I think we need to be realistic going forward, and I don't think that we are. I have a hard time with making a decision based on what we were looking to collect and based on what we're cutting.
So the rest of us do matter, but thanks.
Yeah, you do matter.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I'm with you to a point. However,
You don't have to be there.
well, I'm not all the way there. I'm not all the way there, because I think if we collectively go all the way there, we're gonna have a really hard time ever coming back. So.
No, I'm not looking to go. I'm not looking to throw the bomb. I just want to get down the field.
Understood. I think in order for us to responsibly do that, we're probably going to need to get together more than once a month. So I would like to propose and get everybody's input. I know it's 10 o'clock. Everybody wants to go home. If we don't want to have 3-hour board meetings once a month, then we might need to consider getting together, having these conversations. I'd like to open up the floor and allow the community to talk. I'm getting thank yous and shaking heads and everything else. So what do you all think? Can we make that happen?
What happened?
I want more meetings. I want the community to be able to talk with us.
Okay, so I don't disagree that we need additional meetings, okay, to get over the hump. Do I want a free-for-all?
Well, no, of course not.
No,
We'll let Matt
but
control.
I think that, I think we offer an opportunity for our patrons to come to the podium at each meeting, and I would extend that opportunity if more people want to participate in that process. But I want to confine it to there, not have an open discussion in a board meeting, because then we're setting a precedent that we don't really want to set. So I think it's important to get community input, but I think you also have to do it in an organized manner, because this is a board meeting. And we certainly do want to hear from our patrons. So with that being said, can we look at our calendars right now to see what the next dates we would take a look at for additional meetings?
I just want to be clear about what the
There's
administration is
nothing
being
clear right now.
directed to do.
Directing it all. It doesn't sound like anybody has.
So I feel like we can't move forward with any plans because I'm not clear about what the direction is. So I've heard from a board member, we don't need to make any more cuts. I've heard we would like a balanced budget, and I've heard we would like to increase our reserves. And I'm not really sure which of those plans we are to bring forward, or are we to bring three plans forward?
I think you should probably put together a multi-level look at, what that would look like if, you wanted to maintain 17, 18, and just kind of maybe where we were. We're at 31 at one point, right? Not saying go there, but I think you ought to start somewhere and work your way back and just tell us what that looks like so that we can make a decision and give you direction on staffing. You know, again, I just want to make sure all voices are heard. I think all voices are important, but I think we need to look at everything. So, Mr. Hayne, you want?
Yeah, just real quick. Okay. I think that there is a difference between kicking the can down the road without a plan and buying time without hurting kids. And that's what I'm saying is with the increased revenue that we will receive, we can buy another year to give us time to figure this out. Because if you want to balance a budget, if you want to have a sustainable budget for 10 or 15 years, I'm sorry, folks, but that has sailed a long time ago. That was decided by previous boards and previous administrations. Like Ms. Cope said, when she got on the board, they were projecting $18, $20 million deficits. It was 18 one year, 28 the next. And those were decisions that were made that this board and this administration is coping with at this point in time. But I think that with the additional revenues we've got, we can give that, we can, you know, I'm in favor of saying, you know, let's hire the teachers we need to hire. If you want to add those teachers, add them. We will still be above our 16% at the end of 17-18. We will have a strategic plan in place. We will have a bunch of input from these people, and then we can figure out where we're going from there. I just think to cut additional, it's just not going to work.
So I'm going to go back to what I said a little bit earlier, is looking at a balanced budget with regards to a staffing plan. I think you, your staff, your principals know if there's a place that a position can be eliminated, and you know where they can't. I would like to see a plan come in that has had critical thinking involved and input from your administration and your schools to say, this is where we think we can be this year. This is as tight as we think we can go that is still providing quality education, quality opportunities for our students. So I think in a school, if you have a classroom shift, so there's more fourth graders that are now going to be in fifth grade. So maybe we had extra space in fifth grade, but now we can eliminate someone in fourth grade. Just talking hypothetically.
Fifth grade's a really bad example.
Okay. Just talking hypothetically. Your different buildings are experiencing growth and decline based on their population and their student ages. Where is there opportunities to reduce staff? Where is there a need to add? And I would like to see what's the best that you can bring forward to us with a critical thinking, communication, input, staffing plan.
Okay, so I'm having a hard time understanding previous comments that were made previous to the election. And, you know, I'm going to direct my questions to Mr. Hayne. Mr. Hayne indicated before the election that we don't have a sustainable budget, even with the $14 million. Okay? That's exactly what you said. It's not sustainable. Now we don't have the additional revenues, and you say we're fine. I don't understand that statement. So what I'm outlining to you is that, you know, not being critical, just trying to understand where you're coming from, because you're saying one thing before the election, now you're saying a different thing after. So I'm just wanting to clarify with the folks out here. I agree with you. We don't have a sustainable budget right now. It's not sustainable, and it's not equitable, and it's not gonna be a good long-term plan. So we need to figure out what is a good long-term plan, so it is equitable, it is sustainable, and it does create some sort of I'm not looking for a cushion, but some sustainability long-term, and I don't think it's there yet. And I really think that we need to take a look at what Ms. Cope said, what Mr. Haynes said, what Ms. Walker said, and what I said, and what Chad said, and incorporate, even if you have to look at this meeting again, and come up with a plan that might be, cohesive, that we would all come together on. And I know that's going to be difficult, but I don't want to kick the can down the road any further. I don't think anybody here does. We certainly don't want to cut a lot of things either, but I think that we're at a point, if we needed 14 million in revenue, and that's what we told our taxpayers, then we need to right-size our school district to the point where it's sustainable.
I appreciate that, Mr. LaFata. We can't cut ourselves to sustainability.
I didn't say that.
We can't. The package has to include a plan at some time for additional revenue. We can't cut another $14 million out of the budget, or we'll have 30 kids in kindergarten.
I realize that, but I'm also looking at a budget that doesn't give any increases to our staff for the next 5 years. And that to me, that's a very hard pill to swallow, especially if you're asking these folks to do more work.
But our projected budgets always show flat as is this year carried forward. So we don't usually, and the way I understand in Kevin's budgets and his projections, projections.
Now they show that. They didn't before. They always showed 2.5% increases before, steps.
So, but I guess ultimately my point is, as long as we understand what we're looking at, I don't think there's a person in this room that wants an employee not to have a raise for 5 years. We understand that the projections that are in front of us have parameters around them, and we understand what the parameters are. I have a little different viewpoint on sustainability. We asked for $14 million because we wanted to reinstate many things, and we wanted to do that strategically. We still need to do that. Our district is not, in my opinion, at a point that we cannot continue to pursue increased revenue. That will have to happen. So I'm interested in a budget for this next year because we have a new governor going into office that we don't know what to expect from. We have an assessment year coming up that we don't know what to expect from. And we will need to continue to pursue an opportunity for additional revenue. So my focus is on this next year because I think too much past this next year is unknown.
Now you got another viewpoint, so very, very different viewpoints for sure, but I think we're all kind of heading in some sort of direction that you'll be able to figure out.
One thing that might help with that is, what if we as a board established a committee of, you can't call it a cost savings, but what did Wentzville call it? Didn't Wentzville have some sort of a committee that discussed ways that they could save costs? Good stewards? So what if we, as a board, said, hey, let's put together a good stewards committee. Let's invite whoever from the community, teachers, parents, board members, whomever, and truly seek their input.
I think we could have a good stewards committee, and I think that could be a long-term. Again, I continue to be concerned about our staffing timeline. So we have a lot of different direction here tonight, and Ms. Simpkins needs to bring back a staffing plan next month.
And I appreciate the extra time in possibly moving that back a little bit. But what concerns me about that is we already have staff that are concerned because Prop Howell didn't pass, and they're already on edge and they're nervous. And we have shared with them that we plan to follow that same timeline, because that means that if positions are going to be cut, or they're not, it's not that they won't have a position, but they have to move to a different building or a different grade level or a different type of work within the district, they're expecting those conversations with our normal timeline, which would be in early December. And that gives them that opportunity to wrap their heads around where they're going to be next year. And I will stay up late and work weekends to get that plan done so that they have that information as early as they can, so they can stop stressing and stop worrying about where they're going to be next year. So with some direction from you all, I can still get that plan together and bring it back to you in December and have those conversations with them earlier and later, and hope that it will reduce some stress and keep those high flyers within our district so that they're not already searching for job postings in January and February while we're still trying to make up a staffing plan. So want to keep the high quality teachers and staff members that we have, and being able to share that information with them sooner than later, I think we'll be able to do that.
All right, this is the best I got. I'll give it a go. So December
Wait a
1st.
second, before you go any further, she wanted to ask a question on
Sorry.
on the possible survey.
I'm not real patient, so my thought is.
You?
What if we do send out a survey to the staff and then we have another work session in a week or two to continue that conversation once we've got at least some input from staff? Because I just think we've got some of the best and the brightest, and I wonder if maybe that survey and some of the suggestions that come from staff may not really, really help us. I think we need to meet as frequently as we need to meet to have these conversations. And I want Lisa to be able to get her staffing plan to everybody. I want our staff to know they're gonna have a job. And so to me, that's the number one thing. So if that means get the survey out in 3 days and then we meet in a week and a half, I say we get out our calendars and start planning.
And the one thing that I want to add is, and I don't know what administrators or what administration cuts are included in these numbers, but I didn't see that mentioned in the proposed cuts. And I think that when you're talking about across the board cuts, I think you have to include some sort of administration in that number. Just throwing that out there. And then the last thing is, what date? I would be okay, and I'm sure the board would be okay with moving that staffing requirement maybe even till January 1st or after the first of the year to give us. Well, no, I'm saying no. I'm just talking about preliminary, but nothing that we have to vote on yet. So we would approve the staffing plan. Maybe you provide a preliminary plan, and then we would have to approve the plan and to give us some time to get through this this work. So if we meet again, maybe we can come up with a timeline that closer resembles what you were trying to do. Maybe you're a week or two off, but we still get there. So what's our next meeting date?
December 15th.
So we can have a meeting in between now and December 15th.
Well, let's talk about that. We originally had to have that meeting with the search firm on December 1st. The person that was going to lead that out is no longer able to do December 1st. I was going to backfill that with the other training that you all wanted for MSBA. And we can put the MSBA training on hold. You will have to have that meeting with the search firm sometime in the next 2 months.
Okay. So we'll meet.
So that could open up December 1st.
Okay. What kind of timeline can we get on that if we were to put a survey out to our employees?
We won't get many responses next week.
The what?
We won't get many responses next week.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, your staff, our staff is out Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and that would be the following Thursday.
All right.
I see a lot of head shaking out, so.
You'd be surprised. I think they all realize how severe this is.
Well, I think maybe we try and send it out, get the feedback that we can, and then go from there. I think it's important.
I am concerned about bringing back 3 different scenarios in such a short amount of time as well.
I think we need to work on the staffing plan first and then continue with the rest of the conversations.
I think it all fits together too tightly that it's going to be too difficult to do that. So if we are talking about a balanced budget, a surplus budget, or a slight deficit budget that is going to center with salaries being our primary largest expense, it's going to be very difficult to plan those scenarios out. What if we gave ourselves a little time for both the survey and putting the scenarios together and looked at the 8th instead of the 1st?
Can you put a scenario together that encompasses a hiring freeze? And the reason I say that, what's that?
So if we had 3 third grade teachers that retired this year and not replacing 3 third grade teachers, I don't know that we could do
Or are
that.
you asking for a staffing plan that's status quo?
Yeah, status quo.
So no cuts, no
right.
additions, just a status quo
Same-
staffing as
yeah,
it
same
is today.
level, right.
I think we can show that to you. As we looked at preliminary numbers and class sizes, I think that's going to be difficult in some areas, but we will show you what that looks like and what class sizes will be.
Okay.
And we can bring that back to you at the next meeting.
I'm trying to eliminate this certified FTE numbers and the non-cert FTE numbers. Just to maintain where we're at.
The thing that would not address Mr. LaFata would be the ESC addition that we feel is an important need.
Right, the ESC positions are still important.
We're going to have an additional $2 to $3 million coming in next year that could more than cover those costs. There's no reason to do anything. They have that's going to affect it.
So, I'm out.
You're out. Okay, I'll come back in. Okay, so I think what I'm bringing to you as I prepare a staffing plan, what I think I'm hearing is to stay as status quo as I can, showing you where I can reduce maybe in some areas, add back in some areas where I think my need is, add back my 10 ESCs, but not make as many cuts maybe as are on this list. As best I can. Okay, we'll try it.
So we're meeting on the December 1st? 8, not 1st? What's the 1st?
We have the first set aside to work with McPherson and Jacobson. They can't make it that day. We could, the 1st is still a date we have available. I'm concerned about the survey, putting the survey together and pulling that
So we
staffing
only
plan
had
together.
one meeting scheduled?
Now, we did have 2. We have the 1st and the 15th.
Okay, so we have the 1st and the 15th as board meeting dates. So the 1st is going to be a workshop and not a regular meeting? I know, but that's changed.
You tell us.
So what we're considering with Michelle's concept of trying to get some input, we don't know with the holiday that we'll actually get that input in a timely fashion. So I think what was on the table was to ask if board members were available on the 8th. So we would do the 8th and the 15th. The 8th as the workshop and the 15th as the...
I didn't hear that.
Did you miss that?
I may not be available on the 8th, but I'll give it my best shot.
Yeah, I don't think it matters as I think about the 1st or the 8th. It's going to be difficult to present a specific staffing plan to you all to discuss without having conversations with the staff that may be affected. And that's what I'm worried about. So in the workshop that we would have on December 15th, our staffing plan would call for us to have individual conversations with folks before that staffing plan would go live on board docs on the 9th. So if we meet on the 8th, I then have to figure out that plan and who that affects and then have those conversations with folks prior to, if you want specific FTEs or position titles in that staffing plan. So,
And given the many different opinions at the table, I think we could be alarming some people who might not have to be alarmed.
correct. So I mean, I feel like we could even stay with the parameters that we have, and I can still I have some direction from you, and I could bring a plan to you on the 15th in that workshop, in that setting. And maybe those conversations with those that may or may not be affected, we would have that pending, have those conversations with those employees. And of course, as we always do say, it is, pending the board's direction of the staffing plan.
Is it on? And just want to remind you too that although board docs will go live on December the 9th, that particular part of it wouldn't necessarily have to be posted immediately. You could come back Monday or Tuesday with that part of the agenda if necessary. And then my other question is, does that affect your strategic HR committee plan for December the 6th?
Yes, we tend to have conversations with, show our staffing plan to our HR strategic planning committee to get their input. We tend to show the staffing plan to full cabinet to get their input. We have meetings with our principals and stakeholders to show them kind of what our plan is like, and we already have a very narrow time frame to do that, but we can figure that out.
If I heard the most recent conversation correctly, it was to minimize reductions to staffing. And so in that sense, there's a little more flexibility because we may not need to have very specific conversations. The plan that we outlined at the beginning of this evening's meeting would have required a series of conversations with various groups of employees about proposed reductions that would affect them directly. But what I heard now was we would like a status quo staffing plan, achieving efficiencies wherever possible, but giving Lisa the flexibility to add staff to maintain class sizes where they would otherwise be way out of kilter. We may need to add a teacher for an elementary section here or there so that we don't have one school with 22 kids in 5th grade and another school with 30 kids in 5th grade. So there's...
With the expectation that we would find some cuts in other areas in order to do that, because we're trying to minimize and have status quo staffing? Oh, it's just to bring you some stuff?
Okay, so there's been a lot of conversation tonight. I would probably say go back and review the tape. I'm glad that you guys have the job and we don't. We have to make the decisions, and that's the important thing. We will make good decisions, but more information is probably better. So let's talk about upcoming meetings. That's the next thing on the agenda. I'm sorry, Board of Education. I'm sorry. We're at superintendent comments.
All right. I'll try to keep them minimal. We're going to talk about meetings after I do superintendent comments.
We're getting to the upcoming meetings.
I do superintendent comments, and then we're talking about future meetings.
Yeah.
So the district's been busy since our last meeting. I want to acknowledge that every school has had a tribute to our veterans. I can attest the celebrations were well prepared and worthy of the special group of patrons. It's always moving to see our students, staff, family, and veterans together. I was reminded with our new staff here on board about what a great job we do in Francis Howell celebrating our veterans. Our sports teams and activities have completed their fall season, and again, there's much to celebrate. Francis Howell North boys soccer finished 3rd in state. Francis Howell Central cheerleading was 1st in state, and Francis Howell High School was 3rd. Francis Howell band won the grand championship at the Bi-State Invitational. We had one student from Francis Howell High School named to the National Honor Choir. Several sports had state qualifiers in girls golf, cross country, and softball. The girls tennis team from Francis Howell High School had a doubles team that competed at the state competition. Francis Howell Central had a student named the committee chair for youth and government. We have been notified that Francis Howell has earned for the 11th year the Meritorious Budget Award. If you've been here for a while, you almost expect to hear this announcement this time of year, but we can't lose sight that this is a significant accomplishment that should not be taken for granted. We are one of only 5 districts in Missouri this year,
And on behalf of the district, I want to thank Kevin Supple and Cindy Rauman for their leadership, and to all the finance department who work every day to ensure our budget process continues to be exceptional. The award demonstrates our district's commitment to fiscal integrity. Chelsea Hercules, a vacation station facilitator, Becky David, was awarded the Rising Star at the Missouri School Age Coalition Professional Development Institute. Chelsea was chosen as the single recipient from a pool of nominations across the state of Missouri. While I'm on that topic, our team of vacation station leaders acted as the planning committee for the Missouri After School Network Conference that was held here in November 10th through the 14th. The conference received rave reviews. Kudos to that planning team and for representing Francis Howell, leading the important work across the state. I want to reiterate all the gratitude that was expressed earlier this evening. Thanks to those who gave their time to support the ballot measure, and especially those who helped lead this cause. While we were not successful this time, we have gained much support in the past year. Thanks to our communications team for their tireless support. Francis Howell will continue to build partnerships and increase two-way communication with our community. I know that the conversation has been difficult tonight and in many places. I appreciate the board's dedication to problem solving. There aren't any easy decisions moving forward, and I can tell you that our staff is maxed out and doing all that they can right now. I wish happy Thanksgiving to our board and all of our staff, and I'm hoping the next few days will provide everyone with an opportunity to be with family and get some rest.
Thank you, Dr. Mary. Next item is Board of Education request. Now, this is outside the financial planning. Is there any Board of Education requests you want to request these people that are going to be working tirelessly for the next month? Anything? Okay. And I would just challenge you to take a look at everything, whether it's a service that we provide or whether it's a I think I kind of emailed you one today on a program that's used that they don't really utilize. Take a look at everything that we can potentially save money and eliminate the possibility of having to reduce staff, but be fair and equitable in the process, that we take a look at all employee groups. So that's my only request. So December 1st, we're meeting to discuss, or we decided the 8th or the 1st? Did we talk about?
So will we be doing a work session to further talk about financial planning and also have Lisa on the 1st show us what a status quo staffing would look like? So it might not be the exact same positions in the exact same spots, but what we're hearing is the same number of positions.
So the financial planning would include
more of this
the
festivities that
staffing,
we've had
but
here.
maybe you got A, B, and C, a column.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Just throw out some ideas. Here's A with the staffing plan that she's prepared. Here's B, here's C. Just so that we have something to take a look at. I know there are probably deeper cuts than anybody will want to make, but I think a variety is always the best to have available to us.
So A would be status quo, B would be some addition, maybe this level of cuts are a little bit more, and C would be something more significant?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't go past 20% balances. I think you stay.
Don't worry.
I don't think he's talking about 3 staffing plans. I
No,
think he's
I'm
talking
talking
about
about-
one staffing plan
Right.
that would have an
That
effect
would
on 3 different
incorporate-
budgets.
Right.
And so,
Lisa
and I
got
think
this.
my direction is, what I think my direction is a status quo staffing plan, add where I need to, cut a little bit where I can, and add back my ESCs. And that's the plan that I will bring to you on December 1st. Okay.
Are we doing 5 or 7? 5?
We'll also bring back whatever survey data we have from our staff.
Can everybody make it at 5 o'clock? All right, then 5 o'clock. All right, so 5 o'clock on the 1st, and then that's just going to, just so that it gives these guys some direction, I think that should be a board meeting, so decisions can be made so these guys can move forward. Now, whether we start in a work session and then move to a board meeting and then make the decision so that these guys can get their work done. And it is,
We would prefer to start in a work session and move to a board meeting, and this would be these two items, financial planning and staffing would be the only two
okay.
things of conversation that night.
So we'll have a clear direction for you, and we'll make a decision, because we can't make a decision in a work session, so I think you have to have both.
We likely will not get all those things posted at our usual schedule.
Okay. So December 15th will be the regular meeting. Is there any additions or subtractions of that meeting?
I hate to say one more thing, but as you're looking at future meetings, we are going to have to minimally talk about that search firm meeting that we have to have.
What is the time frame on that?
I think it had to be done by February 1st, so that gives us January.
Okay. Well, that'll be on the agenda for December 15th, right?
We can
Future
look at
meetings.
future meetings on December 15th if you'd like, sure.
Okay. All right.
Just so I'm clear, so we're moving staffing that we were going to approve on the 15th, actually we're moving that up 2 weeks and making an approval on it? Is that what we just said? That's what you
No,
just
we're
said,
having
right?
financial planning. We're going to give them a direction so that they can prepare it so that we can approve it on the 15th.
Okay, because that's not what you said. You said we were going to go to work session, we were going to make a decision kind of immediately thereafter.
The December 15th meeting is a typical work session for staffing, and then we approve it in January.
So yeah, it gives them a direction. We make a decision December 1st. She's concrete on the direction, and then we approve it on the 15th. We're approving a financial direction for them.
I understand that I'm going to share.
It gives them more time to put the plan in place.
I think that I am bringing an
You're
example.
making this difficult, Mike. Just don't make it difficult.
I think my direction is to bring you an example plan on December 1st so that you can continue to have financial conversations, and then we will present the actual staffing plan with any tweaks or new direction that you may give us because of the financial planning. And then we will bring the staffing plan to the December 15th meeting and workshop and present it as the plan for you to approve in January, is what I understood.
That's the part of the tape I'm reviewing.
So based on that, December 1st would only be a work session.
No, December 1st, we would make a decision for you to, as far as, what our financial discussions outcome give us. Why do they?
So at that time, you
how
might
can-
make a
how-
motion
how
to
can-
direct the board, to
Right.
direct
Direct the
administration to
administration
come
to
up with
a
a budget that
of-
is X amount of balances or
Right,
this amount of
right.
cuts. or
I
this
mean, you
amount.
have to we have to make a
Based on the
decision. We
example
can't just throw
staffing plan.
ideas out to them.
So it's more about the motions on the next step, not approving the final.
Correct. So we have to give them a direction on, okay, so this is the percentages that we're gonna approve going forward, and then they provide the plan that we approve. But we can't just throw ideas out to them because we're not agreeing right now. Well, next. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
On the December 15th agenda, I just have one adjustment. The curriculum review says second reading. That will actually be a first reading.
We're in adjournment right now? Okay, noted. Any discussion on adjournment? By roll call.
Mr. Hain,